Ready? Have you heard from Commissioner Lund?
He's not gonna be here.
Yeah, he's
He
not.
he
Oh,
wrote
he's
an
not?
email.
Oh,
Okay, yeah,
I
he's out
didn't
of
see
town.
that.
Well, you guys are getting email.
Well, I asked them to add
I don't
it,
have mine.
my personal one, because I don't look at my city one. So
Yeah.
just write her and tell her to do
Okay.
that. That's how I
don't have to use
knew.
an iPad. So, because I'm that age.
You know,
So
she does
Scott
that,
looked at
she
you
does that
like
for
you
me
were
too, because I was having trouble
two
getting it,
heads.
but give her your personal and she'll send
Yeah,
it
like-
both.
At one point they were doing that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
All right, you guys ready?
yes.
Let's go ahead and get started. It is 6:30. I'm Chairman Thomas. I'll be conducting tonight's meeting. I'd like to welcome everybody out to the North Ogden City Planning Commission meeting, July 21st, 2021, being held here at the building and as well on Zoom. We'll begin our meeting with a invocation or thought from Commissioner Barker, followed which will be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Commissioner Nancaro. I'll go to that point.
Here we come to begin this North Ogden City Planning Commission meeting. We're grateful for this opportunity which we can be here as the planning commissioner, but also a citizen of North Ogden to be able to participate in those things that take place here in the city and strive to make it a place that's good to live and people are invited to be here. And as we help us be mindful of who we represent and why we're here and be able to do things in a civil way that be able to come to reasonable conclusions and help everybody out and say the name Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll make note that Commissioner Lunt is excused tonight. All other commissioners are in attendance. I'll go ahead and read our opening meeting statement. Before each agenda item begins, city staff will give a report. After the staff report, the item will be open for other speakers. The applicant will speak first and be allowed up to 10 minutes. Following the applicant, any other interested person who will be allowed to speak for up to 3 minutes. The applicant has final rebuttal time of up to 5 minutes. Any materials that are displayed or referenced, e.g. pictures or written materials, are part of the record and must be left with the commission. Speakers are required to have signed in at the door or post first and last name on Zoom and will state their name and address before beginning their remarks. If you agree with the previous speaker, then please state your agreement to avoid repetitious remarks. Speakers shall address the commission from the podium or microphone and shall address all comments to the planning commission. And if you're on Zoom, you will just raise your hand or say a chat and we will unmute you and let you into the meeting at that point. It's a lot of people here tonight. Say we haven't had this many people here for 2 years, so it's kind of nice to get back to that. All right, item number 3, ex parte communications or conflicts of interest to be disclosed. Anything, commissioners, on the agenda? As in tonight is all recommendation items, so
I'm not sure if this would count. I'm going to make sure, understand my concern, make sure we're okay. On the first agenda item number 5, the design ordinance has to do with Philip Child's Place hardware store. He come to me, we talked about that. And I helped explain to him what he needed to do to get it for the planning commission and things he may need. I don't know if that's something we need to be concerned about.
well, unless he gave you a 50-pound bag of fertilizer. I think you're
You wouldn't get it in the free, so I'm sorry.
You stand to gain financially from a larger sign?
No,
Okay.
they wouldn't let me put it out.
I think I'm comfortable with Commissioner Barker's participation.
okay.
I am as well.
And I am as well. I had a similar situation on the item that we had down here. Item number 6, I can help the applicant go through the process with the city. So nothing that I stand and gain, I'm just simply helping. We had a meeting with John and Scott on the process to go through to rezone that property. It's one of those, as we talked about, it's a unique situation as a result of some of our changes to the zoning requirements.
And you're not involved in that development.
Nope.
I'm comfortable with Commissioner Thomas's participation as well.
Chair, one thing, as these are all legislative items, ex parte communications are okay. It's the administrative ones.
Since
that
we're
just-
not actually making a decision,
Since the council makes the final
well,
decision.
we just want the council to know that,
Yeah.
you know, members of their city are trying to butter our hands. They're the ones that decide.
But yeah, that's, and you have one of the harder jobs in the city because you do administrative and legislative. With legislative items, these policy decisions, you actually.
It
are
doesn't matter
expected to
because
know
we're not
stuff.
the final say.
Right,
Okay,
so,
well, good. Well, we won't worry about that. Public comments, item number 4. If you're here for an item to address the planning commission, something other than what's on the agenda, we'd invite you to come up and speak. If it's an agenda item, as every item is a public hearing tonight, it'll be open for the public for each item. So if you're here for something on the agenda, please wait till that item is up. But if it's for something not on the agenda, we'd ask you to step up and speak to us at this time. Or if you're on Zoom, go ahead and raise your hand and we'll unmute you. You just walk right by the mics. Get us all excited. We're gonna have a public comment. All right, well, if there's no public comments, we'll move on to our legislative items. Item number 5, Zone Text Amendment 2021-01. This is a public hearing for consideration and recommendation on a legislative amendment to consider revising the total area of commercial signs in the C2 zone. Presenter will be Kai Johnson, our planning tech. Kai?
Chair and Commission. So tonight we have an application. It's from Philip Child, the operator of the Ace Hardware store here in town. The ordinance we're going to be amending is Title 11, Chapter 22, or you're having discussion on this with the Title 11, Chapter 22, Section 7. This is a legislative decision. It's the first one tonight, so I will read the decision statement. When the city is considering a legislative matter, the planning commission is acting as a recommending body to the city council. The city has wide discretion in taking legislative action. Examples of legislative actions are general plan, zoning map, and land use text amendments. Legislative actions require that the planning commission give a recommendation to the city council. Typically, the criteria for making a decision related to a legislative matter require compatibility with the general plan of existing codes. Okay, so our app. That better?
yours, Scott. That other one's not plugged in.
Talk to Scott.
So the property is in the C2 zone, and the applicant has proposed a sign along the west facing side of his building. But as stated in the staff report, he is right at the limit of the 200 square feet that's allotted. So in researching this ordinance in relation to other cities, the application is for, I think, is for an additional 50 square feet of signage in the C2 zone. And in comparing this to other cities, Harrisville allows up to 600 square feet with a single sign space of 300 square feet. There's also provision for additional frontage if the planning commission approves of it. Pleasant View is similar, but in some regards it's based mostly on just the building frontage. Ogden is based on frontage as well. Brigham Square is based on either the square footage or the square linear footage of the lot, or the linear footage of the buildings. There's 4 square feet for every 1 linear foot of building frontage and 2 square feet for every linear foot of lot frontage, whichever is least restrictive. Riverdale allows 3 square feet per linear foot of building frontage. The maximum single size can be 300 square feet and 600 square feet total if the property has a frontage. So our sign ordinance is generally a little more restrictive than these, where we only allow for up to 200 square feet. So that's where the applicant is just, rather than, in this unique case, rather than try and attempt to craft language that is difficult to apply across, in this unique situation, it might be easier just to go with 250 square feet increase in the sign area. And in this situation, I guess through discussion, there's some things to discuss would be the kind of, is the request a positive change for not only this specific property, but does it make sense for the entire city? And then is there additional language that may be appropriate for this, such as limiting the single sign face to 150 square feet, something along those lines, so we don't have the worst case scenario, like 250 square foot sign that's very impactful to the neighboring properties along those lines.
Okay, I have a question, Kai. So I understand we're talking about an ordinance that governs the entire zone and not the individual property. However, this is driven by a request from one person, right? Did we look at other things besides just increasing the square footage? Did we look at any other ways to get the signage for him without just increasing that number? My concern is that if we just have a number, and there's nothing good or bad about that number, but it's our number, and then if we increase it, then we moved our stick in the mud, and then somebody else could come along and increase it, right? And at some point, it needs to be a standard. So did you guys, given did you work with him at all on where he was trying to put the sign, and if there was some other way to craft the ordinance without just changing the geometry, the geometrical figure?
Yes, in this case, the building is it's in a shopping complex, and there is a provision called the comprehensive sign plan that we have, but in this particular case, it's not all one property, so that wasn't an avenue we could follow. So that we could include that type of language for a building with 3 faces with a public right of way or some sort of access right of way, something along those lines. This property is just particularly challenging in its uniqueness.
Okay, I'm sure we're going to hear from the applicant, but I'd be really interested to see exactly what he's trying to do with this, because just moving I understand that increasing the number would probably satisfy this, right? But I'd still be interested to see if there's a different way we could work this out, maybe.
So in my understanding is we're currently at 250. They would like to go to 300 so they could have 50 feet on the side.
No, we're currently at 200, but you'd have to be for 250.
Which is 1/3 of what Harrisville is.
Oh, so okay, I was reading the report you haven't read.
John, do you have an extra pen down there?
That's what we currently have.
But that's regardless of the size of the building or how many sides it has, correct? It's just 250.
Currently, we have a provision that limits the sign size to 40% of the front face. of the
Right, I
building.
was thinking it was a percentage.
And then you get an increase over 200 feet.
One other thought is, if you look around North Ogden, a lot of our signs are old. There's a lot of old signage, especially for the vibrance of the city. Just thinking about what Commissioner Mason was saying, looking for solutions, and thinking about the city as a whole. And I'd be curious to hear, the reason I'm making a comment is I'd be curious to hear from the applicant on this as a business owner's perspective. But do we need to look at our signage policies if they're that far out of date or out of line with surrounding cities? Do we need to look at other elements of signage that makes kind of a cohesive signage for the city? We've got these great poles that were put up, and some people like the flowers on them, some people don't, but I haven't heard anyone complain about the aesthetic nature of the poles that we hang the flowers on. And there's, so it could be something as simple as just wrapping them in black, just to create some cohesive stuff, and that's durable. It doesn't have to be painted or anything like that. But thinking about the city as a whole, there's a lot of old signs out there, and if we're going to increase the square footage to be more in keeping with other cities, is there kind of a win-win here for business owners in doing that? Just a thought.
Okay, well, anything else, Kai, before we hear from the applicant? Let's go ahead and hear from the applicant, and then we'll open our public hearing. Sit over there so you can, or at least speak into that mic. You don't have to sit down if you don't want to.
Sit down's great.
Yep, and then we just have to tell you, and it sounds like you know this, that any handouts have to be left with the planning commission we're giving out, right?
Yeah, that's understood.
Okay.
I'm Philip Child, owner of Ace Hardware here in North Ogden, also a resident of North Ogden, 1353 East, 2450 North. The reason why I come to the City Planning Commission is to, and as we looked at the signage ordinance here in North Ogden, again, we realized that, like I say, you have to have standards, but we didn't feel like asking for an additional 50 square feet. We felt like that was the easiest route to go. It's still under what the other cities require or what they restrict you to. We felt like that was the easiest thing. Originally, when I opened the store back in 2017, the plan was there was going to be a building built on the west side, and it didn't make sense to put a sign up there at that particular time. So we actually have a three-sided building. Well, four, I guess, if you
I
want
hope
to
it's
look at
four.
it.
Stand up.
But you have cars that pass by three of the four sides. We have, as they pass by 2600, they can see the back of our building. We have a small, just says Ace on the back side of our building. We do not have anything on the east side of our building. And then on the front side of our building, we have Ace with a couple of other signs up there that, some of our top brands. And then, so when the bank decided to put the parking lot over there on the west side of the building with the ATM parking lot, there's nothing on that side of the building, as you can see. The top picture shows that what our building currently looks like. There's no signage there. And then the bottom picture is the Ace sign. It is smaller than the Ace sign that's on the front of our building, slightly larger than the one on the back right. Our building, it would just simply say Ace. The reason why we feel like we need this in a lot of our customers that call on the phone or that pass by, their comment is, we didn't know you were there. When they built Starbucks, when the trees are in full bloom, when you're driving along Washington Boulevard, you cannot see the front of our building. It's hidden from the trees in the Starbucks building. There is a small space in between Arby's and Starbucks that you can see. If we put that Ace sign there on the west side of the building, you'll be able to tell, hey, that we're an Ace store and that we're there, rather than just seeing an empty wall, like 130-foot long wall with nothing on it, wondering what business is in that building. So we've come to the City Planning Commission tonight to ask that, and again, the simplest way we looked at this ordinance, I talked to Kai. The simplest way was just to simply ask to increase the square footage on the signage ordinance from 200 to 250. Again, that's still under the other cities, a little bit. We just feel like I say, it's not a crazy sign, just simply says Ace. It's a nice looking sign. We feel like that it would fit in with the aesthetics that you're looking for in the city.
So is your intention to take off the Ace sign on the west side of your building and just replace it with a bigger sign?
No, there's not a sign currently on the west side right now.
And you have the words, oh, that's the proposed.
That's the proposed, yeah.
That was a great Photoshop. That was real.
Yeah, so that's what it would look like if the sign was up, just be in that front part of the building, so that as they drive past on Washington Boulevard, they could look through that opening and say, oh, okay, there's Ace Hardware right there. So that's what we're proposing. That's what it would look like once the sign's up. And it does light up at night. So I say it's nothing crazy, nothing wild, just a sign. Just speaking as far as a business standpoint, signs sell product. Being in business right now at a brick and mortar store, I can tell you right now, this is a very tough time right now that we're going through. This last 2 years have been, kind of wild and crazy. This year hasn't changed. It's still as crazy as ever. Again, signs sell product. We really feel like this is a need for us.
so that Ace has a brand establishment. And we feel like, as people see the Ace sign, that we might, get some people as they're driving by to come in and visit our store and patronize us.
So since you're the applicant, I'm gonna ask you this question.
Yes.
Would you object? I'm tempted to, I mean, that sounds like a reasonable request, obviously, right? Sounds like something that'll help you. I think it actually makes the building look better. I like the Photoshop. So would you be I'm inclined to have a provision on it though, to say you get an extra 50 feet if you're a 3-sided building, for example. I mean, I think that would help your situation, but still limit our signage to 250 square feet for the rest of the zone. Would you be opposed to that?
No, I mean, I'm fine with that. In fact, I've talked about that with we talked about that, I believe, with Kai as well. Again, we just felt like we wanted to keep it as simple as possible, but if you guys are okay, extra 50 square feet with a 3-sided
Yeah,
building. I'm fine with
That would have been my suggestion as well. I think after a public hearing, we talked about is, if you have an addition, more than one side facing a public area, 25% increase in signage allowed, as long as it's not on one side.
I think otherwise, I know we're not at full discussion here, but I think that everyone will go up to the 250 and they'll just wash out what he's doing anyway, right? So.
Well, I'm just more concerned if it's a smaller building, it's like, it's not a percentage necessarily, but I think Kai said we still would have the 40%.
I was looking with the write-in on that, 40%. With the building, or we could change it to 200, 250. Like yours, I'd make sure that 40% still makes it, and have a smaller building, very good, keep some.
This actually looks tiny to me on
Mhm.
this Photoshop.
The building definitely looks better with it.
Absolutely.
Well, let's, before we get too much of a discussion, any other questions for the applicant?
Yeah, I'd be curious to follow up on my comment as a business owner and as a citizen of North Ogden. Do you have an opinion about cities that have signage that have maybe slight, Park City's got wooden signs, we're not gonna do wooden signs in North Ogden, not Park City, but having a black element to it, or do you think that's unnecessary?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that, I don't know
signs,
that would be
obviously.
necessary, but I think, like I say, you want to have, again, as a business owner, like I say, signs tell a story, they sell a product, and they're inviting if you have a nice looking sign. Now, if your sign's dilapidated and out of date or, in disrepair, then obviously, it's gonna look bad on the business, and it's also gonna look bad for the city. But we feel like, I'd say that, as a city council, as a city planning commission, again, you probably should want to do everything you can to help the business succeed. And, giving them the tools, if you do not give the business the right tools to stay in business, then obviously they're not gonna be in business very long. So, again, signage ordinance, again, if it's not hurting the city, not hurting the aesthetics, I think, like I say, it'd be very helpful to businesses, because again, like I say, it's difficult right now. I mean, you're competing against the Amazons of the world and everything else. And then, like I say, right now, it's just a difficult time to do business. And so you want to be able to help the businesses, give them the right tools to stay in business, because if we're in business, obviously it helps the city and it gives the citizens in the community a place to go and buy the products they need and spend their money here in North Ogden rather than driving clear into Ogden City or somewhere else.
If you had a non-3-sided building and you could get 50 more square footage of signing, would you put a new sign in?
I probably would not, because like I say, I have one on the back side of the building. On the east side of the building, I have garden center, and so there's really no place to put it on that side there, because I have a covered awning, so there's not a place to see it there. The front of the building is covered adequate, but again, that west side of the building where it's just a blank wall, I feel like that needs to be there.
Thank you.
So again, I think it would be good, on an individual basis. Like I say, if there's another business in my situation that has 3 roads driving past it, then I would say, yes, probably look at that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you. We'll give
Thank
you time
for
after
taking
public comment.
this into consideration.
Let's go ahead and open the public hearing. If anybody is here who would like to address the planning commission on this item, we ask that you step up to the mic, state your name and address, and we'd love to hear your comments. If you're on Zoom, just raise your hand, type a message in the chat. So the public hearing is now open. And we have no, oh, just about lost that. Oh, he's not.
Pat Burns, 1407 North Mountain Road. I just want to stand and say I agree with the applicant. I think it makes perfect sense to me. I'm a small business owner myself, and if I put up a sign, I don't think that's too much to ask for, or it's not going to be an outrageous sign it's standing out or anything. I support what he's asking for. Thanks.
Thank you.
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second to close public hearing. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. All right. Discussion time. Applicant, you have the right to rebuttal, but being that he had supported you, you probably don't want to rebuttal him. All right. Discussion. I agree with Commissioner Mason. I think rather than just increase the total amount of signage, I don't want to get into, well, now a new business that comes here has a bigger sign than their neighbor, and then the neighbor wants to tear their sign down and make a bigger one because now they're allowed a little bit bigger. I kind of just think to keep away from all of that, we just simply put a clause in there that if you have, additional building side that fronts, parking lot, public space or whatever, you're allowed a 25% increase on sign. I think that covers it.
The other option would be.
And then we just have a caveat in there, in my opinion, that then if you take the 25% increase, the maximum on one side is still 200 feet, meaning they couldn't say, because we have a two-sided building, we can have 250 square feet, and then they put it all on one side.
Yeah.
So that way it's forced to have signage on other sides of the building. And then that keeps it consistent with what we've had with any other businesses that we have, that, we don't have people, that extra 50 feet of sign is valuable, I'm tearing mine down and starting over again. And we see signs growing. This way it addresses a specific need, which I think is needed. I think it's very, very beneficial. And it not only does it help advertise Mr. Child's business here, but it helps the display of what that big wall is there. You see from the street, you're like, huh? Because I was here when the Smiths went down and the plans for rebuild were here, and there was supposed to be a building there, and now it's not. It's like, well, let's put something on the side to make it look good that it's not just a wall. And that, although it is a sign, it adds character and helps, everything. So that would be my opinion. The adjustment that
So
way.
in terms of wording, for example, the new O'Reilly's building, it's four-sided. We might have more of those, along that stretch in the future.
But
If
only
it's
two of them would
four-sided,
face public. So the west faces a public street and the north. Or a
Okay.
parking lot. Like if there's a big parking lot between them and the next, then you would look at saying, okay, you maybe could go on one of the other sides, but something in there that's saying, I guess I don't really
but if
care if
it's
they put it on four
four-sided,
sides.
would you
But
add
I'd
another
still- No, I'd still
25%?
just keep the same limit.
Okay.
because They can divide it up how they want. But
You do have, you can divide how you want, but you have like Starbucks and that sitting down there, have signs on all four sides, but their square footage is okay.
Yeah,
they've
I was
taken
just,
their 200 feet and divided
yeah.
amongst the others.
I was just thinking, wording for a motion in terms of
Because then we're gonna
what we
have
want
five
to change
sides.
it to.
So you go 400 square feet.
You can eliminate
Count the roof.
three-sided, frontage thing and just say a building period. Since we're. Well, I don't know.
Well, I think it's important that we, like Eric was saying, that we have enforced that it's on that other dimension, right? That only 200 square feet can be on one side.
Right.
And that way it
I
splits
agree
it
with
up.
And you can go smaller, but it can't go over the 200.
But if you
Yeah, the
don't.
40% rule still applies. So this is just where their building's big enough to exceed that.
I think that'd be good.
Is that?
The wording couldn't say three-sided.
Yeah, question for Kai then. Kai, does that give you enough, if that motion goes through, as, yeah, not been proposed yet, does that give you enough to draft something for city council? And is there a reason you drafted it the way you did with just kind of carte blanche 250?
Yes.
That's compelling that we should.
That's a good
entertain?
question.
So this site is very unique in the respect that it doesn't have frontage at all. It has no street frontage, and that's part of the reason we didn't. So I mean, if you're looking at like maybe access by vehicles, because it has, you know, roads or parking lots on three sides of it. But as far as applying this situation to the code, it's kind of tricky to do.
So maybe really the wording necessary isn't maybe open to public space or signs. It's simply just, if you put a sign, you get a 25% increase on your signage as long as that 25% is on a different side of the building than
Yeah,
what
I think
the
that
rest is.
I like that.
Up to 250 square feet.
Yeah. So did you, Kai, and I'm not trying to armchair quarterback your job by any means, but I just want to know if there's a reason you drafted it the way that we're glazing over here, maybe, right? Like maybe you thought of some of these things and
We did.
and decided to go with just the 250.
The applicants proposed the language. We did have discussions in regards to how we could make it work, but the applicant is the one that proposed the language.
Okay.
Actually,
It sounds like my question to him, he's comfortable with the provision we put on here. It gets him what he wants and prevents everyone tearing down their signs and just making a bigger sign. So,
yeah,
and
that's
as
fine.
stated, my concern, sorry, is just that we have a stick in the mud and then 2 years from now, someone will come in and, well, what's the big deal to change it from 250 to 3 and then we go 350 to 4, right? Because it's just a number. And so, okay, thank you.
That's why the language that Eric is proposing, we've gone over works so well. It keeps the sign from going too big and keep within that range. That way you're not getting out of control.
If you know the wordage so good, then make a motion.
I think I
City council.
jotted something down.
Let me see, let me give my dementia here.
Commissioner Nancarrow's got notes. So.
You get second.
Okay, so I make a motion that we recommend to the city council to make this change to the code with the following change, that the applicant can request a 25% increase for an additional side of the building that faces a street, up to 250 square feet total.
Can I amend that?
Please.
Just that it faces a street or an open space.
Yeah, parking lot.
Agreed.
I want to make sure I get that correct. 250 square feet or
Total
20%
aggregate signage.
Total signage.
total signage.
And I would not to exceed 200 feet on any one
Yeah,
side.
that's where that's. my
That
question.
amendment as well.
That's what my question was.
Okay.
So I can
Good luck.
second that.
Councilman Swanson, did you understand that? Okay. He's reading the minutes, right? All right,
Hopefully.
we have a motion. Did you second that, Commissioner Rucker?
Yes, I did.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All right, Commissioner Arner,
Yes.
Commissioner Nancarrow,
Yes.
Commissioner Barker,
Yes.
Commissioner Mason,
Yes.
Commissioner Webb,
yes.
and I vote yes. So that recommendation will move on to city council. If you're aware of their schedule, it probably won't be heard until September. We only have one meeting in August, so. And I think it's the first, is it their first meeting?
It'll be on August 17th for a meeting with business.
Oh, okay.
So there will be a there won't be a work session, so it'll be August 17th.
Just so you know, it'll be probably our first meeting in September.
So it won't be in August, yeah.
It doesn't sound like it, because they only have the one, right?
I mean, I think it might be able to get on the 17th, we just
Oh,
need to verify that with the mayor and record it it'll work.
Okay,
That was kind of rambling, Kai. Can you Was it enough to give you the language, or do I need to restate?
I can watch it.
Thanks.
All right, well, let's go ahead and move on to item number 6, zone map amendment 2021-4. This is a public hearing for consideration and a recommendation to city council on a legislative application to rezone property for land located at approximately 96 east, 3275 north, from single family residential to R110 to suburban residential RE20. Brandon Bell is our presenter. Brandon?
You mean chair and members of the commission. This is also a legislative item. Again, it's at 96 East and 3275 North. This, again, in the proposed zone changes from R110 to RE20. It's an approved lot and then a nearby parcel that's separated by a canal. There's a home on the lot that was built many years ago, and the surrounding area is R110. The proposed property that's the property that's proposed to be rezoned, again, it was built on many years ago. And so the general plan guidelines relating to this proposed rezone, I'm going to go ahead and read those, and then I'll provide staff comment on them. The first guideline is that a definite edge should be established between the types of uses to protect the integrity of each use, except where the mixing of uses is recommended in the general plan. Staff comment is that the low density designation or low density residential designation in the general plan calls for a range of densities, which include those permitted in the RE20 zone. And there are a number of RE20 zone areas that are in the low density designation in the general plan. The RE20 zone is pretty similar to the R1 zones in that they both allow single family dwellings at relatively low densities as a permitted use. The significant difference is that the RE20 zone allows some agricultural uses. This property has historically been home to an orchard. The trees are still on the property, but it's not primarily an agricultural use. And the property is 6.37 acres. It actually says 4.61 in the written report, but that didn't include the additional parcel. So it's 6.37 acres, and it meets the requirements for an RE20 lot in that zone. The second general guideline is that zoning should reflect the existing use of the property to the greatest extent possible, unless the area is in transition or is in conflict with the general plan. This area is not in transition and is fully developed. However, the RE20 zone can be considered a zone with uses that are similar to the R110 zone, and the zoning would better reflect the existing use of the property being a large lot, a very large lot. There does not seem to be a reasonable possibility of the change of use to some sort of heavy agriculture. The proposed rezone is consistent with the property owner's desires for the property. This would also provide a level of protection from the property developing in the future, potentially with smaller R1 lots on the hillside. And again, the proposed zoning it's fair to say that the zoning would reflect the current use of the property. The next guideline is that where possible, properties which face each other across the local street should be the same or a similar zone. Collector and arterial roads may be sufficient buffers to warrant different zones. Staff comment is that the property across the street and the other surrounding properties are R110. The RE20 zone can be considered a similar zone as the R110 zone. The next guideline is that zoning boundaries should not cut across individual lots or developments, placing the lot in two separate zones. Illogical boundaries should be redrawn to follow property or establish geographical lines. Staff comment on this guideline is that the proposed zone change would not cut across individual lots. It would, however, extend across property held by the United States of America for the canal. Obviously, our zoning wouldn't apply to them, but staff felt that would be best to just make that area RE20 zone if it does go through, to encompass both properties that are one on the north side of the canal and the other on the south. The next guideline is avoid isolating neighborhoods. The staff comment on this is that this is a similar use and will not isolate the existing neighborhood. The next guideline require excellence in design. Staff comment is that this guideline does not directly pertain to this application. That sort of issue would be addressed at any sort of building permit question, but there is again a home that's already on the property. And then the final guideline is consider development agreements to assure higher quality development, and no development agreements proposed for this rezone. The proposed rezone conforms to the North Ogden City General Plan, and the general plan map, land use map calls for this property to be developed as low density residential. This application was submitted by the property owner, and I think they believe the property owner is here tonight. I think they can address any questions regarding their interest in rezoning it. The summary of planning commission considerations is the proposal consistent with the general plan, and how does the proposal relate to these zoning and land use policy guidelines that have been discussed, commented on. Staff recommends that the planning commission conduct a public hearing, receive public comment, consider the general plan rezoning guidelines, and make a recommendation to the city council. Staff recommends that the planning commission can find that this application is consistent with the general plan, and recommends approval of the rezone from R110 to the RE20 zone. Are there questions that the commission has for me?
Yeah, it doesn't look like it, but it looks like there's plenty of frontage there, right? But I just want to make sure we're not bringing them into a non-conforming situation.
No.
So, and my concern is on the frontage, is there?
No, there's, I believe it's about 137 feet. I measured it for the same concern. The reason why it may look like it's a concern is that
Because it's so big in the back.
all of the lots in the front are actually about 1.5 times as wide as the zone standard. And so we sort of assume that they're smaller than they really are, but they're all wider than the minimum.
So there's just a road that goes back there and accesses it from there, or?
A driveway.
It's a driveway, yeah.
And until today, I didn't know I was trespassing all the time when I was walking out. Did anyone else? Yeah.
Currently, it's a private lot with one home on it, and then a separate parcel back behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the strip is actually owned by.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So it's a lot that is divided into 2 sections with
Okay.
US government land. But
Yeah.
Any other questions for Brandon?
Pretty straightforward.
Okay. Thank you. We'll invite the applicant up. Who'd like to address this. And
Good evening. My name is Brad Johnston. I'm the resident at 96 East 3275 North. And reason why I'm requesting the rezone is because it does fall into the R1 zoning right now. And so it really limits that size of property for my use. When we found that property, we were running on the trail. Yes, seems like you're trespassing, but we do get a lot of people that run by all day long, every day, and we love it up there. But that's how we found the place, and being it was that big of a piece of ground, that was the big reason why we moved. We weren't in love with the house. We liked the property. So the reason why we're requesting that is so we can fully use that property. We also have an interest in the property to the west of it at some point, but for right now, that's what we're focused on.
When you say fully used, what the agricultural uses?
Yeah, right now that we do have a lot of apricot trees. If ever anyone wants apricots, just jump the gate. But we
remember, this is public record.
Yeah, come on over, get as many apricots as you want. But right now we've done a lot of work to the apricot orchard. It is an aging orchard. We do have plans to, update that. We love that. That's why we bought it. And then, as you can see on the photos, the tree line is actually down below the canal line, and we want to be able to, use the full property. So.
I think I saw something in there you were interested in putting animals on as well. Yeah.
Not right now.
Oh, in the future.
That's we want the opportunity to. Yeah.
And then, just to clarify, if I'm reading the map right, the property, we mentioned property to the west, which that's not part of this.
No.
But I believe that's in the county. Is that?
It is.
Right. So that would be a similar use as well, just to make note that it's county property to the west, not currently in the city. Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, this time we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. If you'd like to comment on this item, please step up to the mic, state your name and address. We'd love to hear from you. Again, the public hearing is now open.
You again.
Pat Burns, 1407 North Mountain Road. It's kind of weird for a developer to stand up and say, I agree to actually make his home bigger. It's not very commonly heard. I usually get beat up for doing the opposite, but I do understand this property and I completely agree with why he's doing it. And as I see that it makes perfect sense. So for what that's worth, I do agree. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second it.
We have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, discussion.
Prior to any discussion, I move that we recommend approval of this rezone from R110 to RE20 to the city council.
The only quick comment is, there's a lot of stuff in the city plan about, encouraging a rural feel. And I think this helps with that. And I think we gotta, if that's what the city wants, then we got to, anytime something like this comes up, we have to remember that that's been the voice of the city. And if there are people out there who don't want a rural feel in it, or anyone, we gotta engage and let us know. But I like a rural feel. That's why I'm here.
I think you just seconded your motion.
Yeah,
Did you second my motion?
sure, I'll second it.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? I would agree. It enables the use of the ground. It's, things that he may want to do in the future or whatever. 6.5 acres, the RE20 zone is really proper. That R110 is kind of a no. It starts to get a little awkward if you want to utilize your property as that large of a piece. And it really kind of assures that any neighboring people or whatever, that now, if he was to sell the property or do something, say, oh, hey, we want to develop it one day, now they're just stepping back into a process that makes it more difficult to develop in the future because they'd have to zone it back to something smaller or have large lots on it, which if I was the neighbor, I would like that. So I think it's a good thing. Well, if there's no more discussion, then we'll go ahead and vote. Let's see. Commissioner Mancaro,
Yes.
Commissioner Barker,
Yes.
Commissioner Mason,
Yes.
Commissioner Webb,
Yes.
Commissioner Arner.
Yes.
I vote yes. That'll move on to the city council. Hopefully the 17th, I guess. It's a relatively small, quick item. All right, item number 7, another zone map amendment, 2021-05. This is a public hearing for the consideration and recommendation on a legislative application to rezone property for land located approximately 2679 north, 450 east, from residential city center to residential multifamily R4. Presenter is Scott Hess, planning director.
All right, thank you, Commission. This is a half-acre parcel in residential city center, just within walking distance of downtown. This is another legislative matter the Planning Commission is considering, so this would be a recommendation tonight to the City Council, depending on the decision. So the applicant is requesting a rezone. This is an existing home, single-family structure, as well as some accessory structures on the site. It's in a state of disrepair. It's an older property. You actually have an old field fence between this property and the east. It's kind of rare to see, I think, now in city center. You got a 3-wire barbed wire fence, which is kind of interesting. So just an old kind of heritage existing piece of property, single family. The applicant proposed a 6-unit development after coming, I believe, to a general plan committee meeting approximately a year ago and had an idea of doing a multifamily project. The residential R4 zoning, based on the calculation that I've done, would allow up to 5 units on that half of an acre. So The design of the family residential is shown tonight on a proposed site plan and building plan set, but if there was a recommendation to approve the rezone, the project after making it through city council, if that were what the city council decided to do, the project would actually come back to the planning commission as an application for a conditional use permit with a site plan review for the multifamily residential under the R4 code at that time. Conformance with the general plan, staff feels that the proposed rezone does meet the requirements of the applicable North Ogden City ordinances and conforms to the North Ogden City general plan. The current general plan calls for this area to be developed as downtown mixed use. It's a loosely defined term in the general plan. It focuses on walkability and simply defines it as a mixed use character. So we've been doing work with the General Plan Advisory Committee. You'll actually hear a presentation later tonight on this that has supported the idea of a city center area or kind of a radius around our city hall and library and our transit lines and some of the commercial we have that would increase the intensity and housing choice in that area surrounding the downtown core. So the rezone, it seemingly meets the downtown mixed use character as well as the general plan that the General Plan Advisory Committee is currently considering for the future. Following policies consist of general statements to be used as guidelines similar to the one that Brandon went through with you, so I'll give you my staff comments. A definite edge should be established between types of uses to protect the integrity of each use except for the mixing of uses as recommended in the general plan. The general plan does call for this area to be downtown mixed use where mixing of uses is cited currently as existing and is also encouraged by the general plan. The general plan focuses on walkability. This area, the city has really the best access to services, which include parks, schools, shopping, civic uses, and the only transit that we really have in our city for the foreseeable future. The next general guideline zoning should reflect the existing use of the property to the greatest extent possible, unless the area is in transition or is in conflict with the general plan. So this area, the city has long held a mix of uses and development types. Similar multifamily development is adjacent to the property to the south, and two family dwellings are located just 1 block south of this area across 2650 North. So staff believes that an increase in housing choice in this area is consistent with the existing use of the properties in the general vicinity. And the next guideline, where possible, properties which face each other across a local street should be the same or a similar zone. Collector and arterial roads may be sufficient barriers to warrant different zones. This parcel is located on a local street and shares a block with similar uses. So if you compare it to the block that it's being developed on, it's really cohesive in that block. The immediate across the street neighbor, or at least across from the development neighbor, would be North Ogden Park. First the skate park and then the school. And the property to the north, which would be its one across the street neighbor, is a single family use, and then there's one single family home to the west. Zoning boundaries should not cut across individual lots or developments. That does not happen in this one. This is a single lot, a single rezone. Residential guidelines avoid isolating neighborhoods. This proposed change would not isolate an existing neighborhood, require excellence in design. A building permit would be processed in the future for the home and the accessory building, which would meet city standards, as well as the planning commission having an opportunity to weigh in on the site plan. And then consider development agreements to assure higher quality development. Staff is not considering a development agreement with this rezone. It's really a single project that's more for some of the larger master planned projects. So the planning commission considerations tonight is the proposal consistent with the general plan, and how does the proposal relate to the zoning land use policy guidelines? Staff's recommendation is for the planning commission to conduct a public hearing, receive public comment, consider the general plan rezoning guidelines, and make a recommendation to the city council. Staff recommends approval of the rezone for residential city center to multifamily R4 zone, and staff believes the planning commission can find that the application is consistent with the general plan. With that, I'll take any questions.
So Scott, is there, being that there's multifamily directly south of this, and it is in the city center zone, is that something that was there before we created the city center zone? So it's not allowed to.
That's my guess. The residential city center zone, I was trying to go back through the history of the amendments in it, because at one point it allowed two-family dwellings on certain size lots. And that looks to have been taken out of everywhere except for the purpose and intent statement of the zone, which is kind of confusing. When you read that, it says single family and two-family dwellings. But that's no longer listed as a permitted use, but effectively because of the state, stripping away our ability to not disallow accessory dwelling units. Right now, if the property were subdivided, say into 2 quarter-acre parcels, you could effectively get 4 units. You could get 2 duplexes or single-family homes with an accessory dwelling unit that meets our requirements. So the net increase overall is potentially 1 unit and the change in design from kind of 2 single-family units with accessory dwelling units to this side-by-side single building. But it's a good question. I don't know what the original zoning was that permitted the apartment
I
complex.
think that those were there before we created this city center zone. My only thought was if half the block is already, more used as an R4 zone than the city center, is there a reason why we just don't rezone the whole block to an R4? And I mean, there's a commercial piece really on the corner. We could exclude that, but is there, at least then that brings half the block into conformance with the current zoning.
I
I
think,
don't know that hurts anybody, but
well, I think one comment with that, and kind of thinking about a presentation that Brandon Bell did a month or 2 ago, maybe 3 months ago, where in Ogden, he had examples of different buildings, and he highlighted something that I thought was really interesting with the difference between a duplex and a property that has an accessory dwelling. And the big difference that you have there is you have, at least per our policies, you have a homeowner, it has to be owner occupied, and then you have an accessory dwelling. And I think that the nature of a building like that is significantly different than a 4-unit fronted garage. The nature of how those properties evolve is significantly different. It doesn't necessarily affect the person selling the property on the front end because 4 is 4 per se, but it does over time affect the character of the neighborhood. And I think that was some of the thrust of what Brandon Bell was trying to show us in these different areas of, hey, you've got a lot more options than maybe what we've traditionally done in North Ogden. And in fact, some of them you can see in Ogden City. And you look at them and you're like, wow, that's a really beautiful building, yet it meets the same density requirements that, so we're kind of heading to this spot where it's hard for people to afford houses and it's tricky. That doesn't mean that they have to be things that deteriorate, if we are creative with our policies. So anyway.
well, I mean, I would agree. I guess the reason for me in the R4 versus something like that, I'm thinking accessory dwellings is really the location of this is meant that more downtown area, which the general plan is promoting, get the density, multi-use and densities up in those areas. And so, I mean, we're talking one little piece that one way or another, it's 1 unit, but I'm really looking at it's just, if we look at the block, the building, the apartments to the south where I'm assuming looks like there's maybe 8 units there. I don't know on that.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying, but I don't know that I agree with it. I don't see it as the same because of the character of that area. I think it's got an interesting history. I really do. I think if you look at areas that have evolved over time and you compare certain parts of Ogden, or even you take like a neighborhood like the Avenues or Harvard Yale and Salt Lake, they've evolved in different ways because of how they've done a city center type policy. And I think we've got an opportunity here with this area to not, to still honor existing homeowners that are trying to sell their property, yet also honor the character of the neighborhood. So that's just my opinion though.
Can I clarify something? Question for you. So if the property will be to be rezoned eventually to what's proposed, they could get a 6-plex unit on there?
No, today it would be 5.
No, okay, so today would be, today with no rezone, they could put a 5.
With an R4 is a 5.
Right, yeah, so today they could get, one single family home with an accessory dwelling unit, or they could split off a 9,000 square foot corner lot, leaving a 13,000 square foot remainder, or cut it in half. There's not enough room to split this into 3 in the RC residential city center. So the highest and best use would be subdivision into 2 parcels, 2 new single family homes that each have an accessory dwelling unit for 4 potential living areas. Under an R4 rezone, there's a calculation that you begin with a certain number of square footage for the first 2 units. It's 12,000 square feet for the first 2 units, and then 3,000 square feet for every unit beyond that. You can't use partial numbers. So by my calculation, it's 5 that you can get on this. And then there's some other site constraints. You've got open space requirements. You've got to meet parking requirements, setback requirements. So 5 is really maximizing this under the R4 zone for this one particular half-acre piece.
Okay, I remain unconvinced and would need to have someone convince me to change my mind that this property is not in the residential or in the city center zone. I mean, it seems like it's the definition of our city center zone. So you feel like it's an acceptable rezone because the uses are so similar?
I feel like it's an acceptable rezone because the general plan says that this area should have a mix of uses and focus on walkability. And so to take one unlivable structure and turn it into potentially 4 and or 5 relatively affordable units that are walkable to transit and services and an elementary school and a park, to staff's, to my feeling, I think that it makes a lot of sense.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry to put you on the spot with your feelings that are just like that. Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions for Scott? Let's go ahead and open up our public hearing. Again, this is to rezone 2679 North, 450 East from city center, residential city center to R4 multifamily.
And I didn't mention the applicant is here. Do you have any questions? Yeah.
Oh, yes, we didn't. Sorry, we got talking so much. Let's invite the applicant before you have the public hearing. Can address this.
This property
Please
is.
state your name and address.
Okay, it's Shauna Flinders. The address 2679 North, 450 East, North Ogden. This is a property that I grew up on. That's across the street from the elementary school. My parents have both passed away. My dad passed away last year and on this property, and during that time had a really hard time keeping up with it. It has a lot of mature trees. It's pretty overgrown. It's relatively unsightly. I don't know if any of you know where it's at, but it's directly across from Biscuit Park, a purple house with the garage. We think that there is an apartment building that literally touches our property line right there. And what we actually came in January by Zoom and spoke to you people because I didn't want to put a lot of money into this unless it was something that, we felt like it was something that we could do. So with your semi-approval, we went ahead and I got the engineering done. I've got planning, the architect to draw up the plans. We put a lot of thought into the fact, like I say, this kind of has a little piece of my heart because I grew up on this property. We put a lot of effort into what it was going to look like to make sure that I blended with the neighborhood. It's a craftsman style townhome. We're not opposed to whether it's 5 or 6 at this point, but we always felt like it's directly across from the skate park, the school, all the things that young families should be able to use. We don't want to build it as a rental. Our plan is to do separate sewer lines and sell these as separate, almost single family homes, but just common wall. Is basically, our thought is that we want to get young families in right by this park. I mean, we could probably put, a big house on there, but that doesn't really make any sense to the neighborhood. We don't think it's, not making, as Scott said, use of that area where they should be able to walk. You can walk to the stores You know, it will definitely be an upgrade to the property. I've never heard anyone be opposed to it. You know, someone mentioned something about, you know, trying to keep this neighborhood as residential, but I really feel like this does, you know, keep it that way. Not only that, but it is a great transition from this apartment building to townhomes and then to, you know, the single family homes that are there. And the neighbors that I've spoken to that are directly around it, I've never heard anyone say that they didn't like that plan. Like I said, we've been very careful about the look of it and just think that it will be a very nice upgrade to that piece of property. One thing I will say is that there's a few, you know, on this block, as he was saying, to me, just make that whole block, there's a few dilapidated properties that are, you know, going up this street. And I know that now that you've put Washington through and kind of cut a big piece out of those properties at the top, I'm not really sure that, you know, like I said, I've heard people say that they want to keep this neighborhood the same, but I think at this point, with the amount of people that are moving into Utah, there's going to be some change regardless. And I just think that for us to go ahead and put that in, it's going to help that area and make it look better. So we hope that you will, you know, let us put it through. It's going to be expensive to demo. There's a lot of, you know, outside people coming in from outside of North Ogden and going down in to the flatlands and buying up farmland and putting in, you know, I assume millions of dollars worth of townhomes down there. But the residents that are trying to upgrade their properties, I feel like you should have an opportunity to own that property and help, you know, upgrade parts of the city that are actually starting to look pretty bad. So that would be my argument, and just hoping that can go through. Let me make enough money to clear this property because it's horrendous.
Thank you. Any questions for that?
I do have a question, ma'am. So you mentioned that you had spoken with some of the neighbors. The property that's directly to the west, directly behind, that seems to me to be so just to, it would be the left of the property on this.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I can't read it on there, but I don't know if you've spoken with them, but they seem like they would be the most impacted by having this property right next to their single family home. So I don't know if they're here tonight, but
I don't know if they're not here tonight. Oh.
I'll wait to hear from them. I was just gonna
Okay,
ask
yeah,
if
you
you'd
can hear from them.
spoken.
Like this is right now has a barbed wire fence. That's what he was talking about. We, you know, obviously plan to put up a privacy fence for that, you know, right there.
Mhm.
And I think it would definitely be an upgrade, but I am absolutely.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Would like to hear it correctly.
All right, let's, now we've heard from the applicant. Let's go ahead and open the public hearing. Again, if you're here, would like to address us on this item, please step up to the mic. The public hearing is now open.
Hi, I'm Leanne Lippert. I live at 2660 North, 450 East. We share a fence with the skate park, so we're across the street to the east. I just wanted to thank you for your service on the Planning Commission. I think it's awesome, and I respect that you do that for your city. Thank you. And thank you also for sending a letter to notify us of this change. I appreciated that. We wouldn't have known. I am strongly opposed to changing the zoning, not for keeping Shauna and her husband from developing it anyway. I'm happy for them to have that chance. Of course, it belongs to them. But I am hoping that we'll keep our city center zoning. My family and I were part of the group of citizens that helped create this zone in 2005. And I'd like to give you some context about that. I think it would help you understand our feelings. At that time, we were shocked, several neighbors, and were shocked to witness this massive 10-plex being built smack crammed in the middle of a block surrounded, completely surrounded with single dwelling homes. And that is still the case today, except for the commercial corner. And one of those single family dwellings has been turned into a duplex. But this templex was crammed right in the middle of this block, and we were horrified. We felt so betrayed by the planning commission. We felt so betrayed by the city council. We thought that they had just tried to sneak it in there, you know, because we hadn't been given any notice. So in a very, very committed effort to understand how this could happen to our neighborhood, we as a group researched every ordinance, every regulation. We even sought legal counsel. And it turns out really that we were right. That conditional use permit was improperly granted to that, for the templexes. So just for your information, there was not the required footage. You can drive by it and you can see with your own eyes that there wasn't the proper setback between the big buildings. The property was developed under a group dwelling permit, and there was not the proper green space. I already said there wasn't the proper setback, and you can visually see that when you drive by. This is, and we got to the bottom of that, and the planning commission was very sorry. They had only gone on the recommendation of the director. I don't know his proper title, Mr. Barker, whatever, not you, Barker, it was Craig Barker, I think his name was. And the city council had approved it only on the recommendation of the planning commission. So we did get to the bottom of this. They felt really sympathetic, and we felt terrible because North Ogden really lost some good citizens because of this. They moved away rather than have apartment buildings looking down at their little girls playing in their backyard. And it was super personal to us, super personal. We all came together in response to that and didn't want to repeat this mistake. So the city attorney, with the help of the city attorney, the planning commission, the city council, lots and lots of neighbors, this new zone was created, this residential city center. And the point of it was to protect the heart of North Ogden. I appreciated what Councilman Webb talked about, how you really can protect like the character of a place by controlling how these projects continue. This basing acceptance or not acceptance on that templex for this new project that we're talking about is not a fair thing to do, because that was a mistake. It was proven to be a mistake. I just hope that you'll consider that it is a neighborhood. It's my neighborhood. And we want to feel safe in our neighborhood. And we have in North Ogden plenty of multi-housing dwellings. And that master plan is being fulfilled down here right around in North Ogden. One more thought, and I think you already said it, but that block is still surrounded by single family dwellings. And I just want to point that out. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you.
Andy Lippert, 2660 North, 450 East. This was my wife. I agree with her. I have to agree with her. But I'd like to add a couple of things to that. I am also opposed to the proposal as it stands right now with the rezoning. The wordage for the intent of this type of zoning is to encourage the preservation of single-family dwellings in the historical area of North Ogden. And if you look at this right here, these two fiveplexes, if you drive around there, you don't even see them. They are down in a hollow. There isn't really any frontage of that. There's no frontage at all. If you drive around this block, every single home you see is a single family home. We live right here, and this templex has greatly affected how things changed for us. Now, there is apartment complexes down here, but this block is a single family home. And if that were to be changed with what I saw in the proposed, where maybe have facing garages or something, there's not a single home here that has that kind of a same look. It would change, in my opinion, the appearance of our block, our neighborhood. And so one of the questions that what Mr. Hess said about whether this is a transition or changing the existing use, I think the way it's being proposed right now, this would actually transition our neighborhood in something that it is not right now. And the Bell family just built a single family home just across the street to the west of the tennis park. So there are still people who are coming in building a full-size family home. They want to live in North Ogden. And we appreciate the proximity, the walkability to the library I go to with my grandkids and having access to the 7-Eleven. That's all fine and good, but we'd like to keep it that way. It's a historic part of the town. The Bodleys are a part of that town, the way they've lived that way, and we appreciate that. And so we'd just like to encourage the commission to take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've actually come to terms with that fence, the barbed wire.
Good.
I'm like the others, I hate to see the good.
Needs your name and where you live, sir.
I'm John Shoup at 431 East, 2700 North. I like the others, I hate to see the good single home family dwellings go by the wayside, especially in the heart of North Ogden. The multi-use things that are going on. And this is probably too little too late, because I've had this feeling for a long time that the more multi-families you put together just in a smaller area, you know, it's not very wise for disaster preparedness. You've got a lot of people, many people are the younger people. They haven't had a chance yet to stabilize and get a plan like that in place. There's not the room for storage. And when a disaster does happen, especially in the townhomes and those sorts, you know, they can't hardly rely on each other. It multiplies the problems, is what I'm trying to say. I feel like we've already overdone the multifamily dwellings in this area as you from here on over and up. I see where they're trying to make it better than, oh, they're certainly not like the 10-plex behind us, however they sunk that in there. But I just would like to invite all of the decision makers and to make sure they come and see the area about these things before a decision. And, you know, because previously it doesn't seem like that's been done. The people who made the decisions evidently didn't even go look at the area. And that's been a few years ago that I'm talking about. So I just wanted to put that in, and thank you.
Thank you.
Sir, you have the property directly behind, correct?
Yes, right next door. There.
There, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Good evening. My name is Kent Bell. I live at 2739 North, 450 East. And I am against the residential multifamily zoning also. As was stated by Mr. Lippert, Karen and I moved into our home just last September. We used to live on 850 East, and I'm a lifelong resident of North Ogden. I was born and raised on 850 East and 2600 North, and only live about a mile away from where I was born there. I love North Ogden. When we decided to build a new home, I wanted to try to stay in North Ogden. As was pointed out by Mr. Webb, I like the rural, little bit of a rural feeling compared to what it used to be. It's not that, but when we bought our lot, we have an open lot to the north of us, and the guy that is north of that has horses. I like the smell of horses. It's nice to have a little bit of a reminder rather than just seeing them in a museum, that we actually do have that kind of thing around. And across the street, we have the park, which is nice to have that facility to go to. So anyway, we worked long and hard all of our lives to be able to buy a new home and enjoy it in our retirement years. And so I just like you to consider that and consider what it would be like to live next door to something like that when you had an open space before. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second it since Commissioner Barker isn't close to his
Prior to
microphone.
close, just verify, John, has there been anybody on Zoom?
I apologize, I wasn't watching.
Yeah, good catch.
I don't see any raised hands.
Okay, and no comments that have been typed in?
No.
All right, thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Prior to our discussion, it is the applicant's opportunity to have a rebuttal, 5 minutes rebuttal time. Any comments made, if you'd like?
Well, first of all, I'm a little blindsided because I've never heard anyone oppose anything until this point. I have a very good friend that I've been talking about this for a long time and has never said anything about it, not being something that would fit in there. I think to some degree, I have to say that I don't really think it's fair to judge what we're trying to do by whatever happened with this apartment building years ago. I know even my mother at that time was opposed to how that went down. And so I know that there was some unfair things that happened during that really doesn't have anything to do with us. So I feel like we're a little bit being judged by what happened with that property. I know that it is just some buildings thrown in there. There's no green space. They were just put in. I don't know what happened with that. I'm not completely opposed to doing something else with this property. I do kind of feel like, to some degree, there's an influx of people coming into Utah. And I don't know that everyone's gonna be able to tell everybody what they have to do with their property. I think this is even the planning, or the building commission said that, this is a very, property, owner conscious state for property rights. We, should be able to do what we want to with our property. I don't know what these people propose that I do with my property. It sounds like they just want me to build a single family home and not have any choice about what I do with the property. We actually have gone to a lot of work to make sure that these, it's not a big apartment building or anything like that. And it sounds to me like it's already zoned for me to put a couple of houses in there with, some basement apartments, which is, in my opinion, much more tacky you know, to have people that are, you know, going in and out of a basement apartment. Other than just that it controls, you know, what I can put on my property. We're not trying to upset or hurt anyone by doing this. I mean, it's, you know, I don't think it's gonna, because we have gone to the trouble to make sure that these have, you know, pantries in the kitchen and walk-in closets. They're much nicer, you know, units and townhomes in our, you know, in the lower portion. I don't think that we're gonna get any riffraff coming in there. We actually want to sell them to small families. And so, like I said, I didn't realize that there was such an upset in the neighborhood. Because I had never heard this before. And like I said, this is, you know, I'm not sure how long, you know, we're gonna be able to keep this tiny little block houses, because it's getting run down in that neighborhood. And so I think, I still believe that this would be an upgrade to that portion of the neighborhood. I still think it's something that will look good there, and, you know, it's my property, and I think to some degree, just have people come in forever to tell property owners what they can do with their property in that area is a little unfair. So that would be my stance on it. I guess if we have to do something else, you know, it's expensive to go in and take out an existing home with a basement and, you know, giant trees. This property is full of trees. It's gonna be thousands and thousands of dollars just to clear it. So to even make it worthwhile, I've got to do something to make a little bit of money on it. And with what's going on in Washington, there's a very short time before the economy is gonna collapse. So it would be nice if we could do something to upgrade that property before that happens.
Thank you. Well, this, commissioners, will open up our discussion, and, you know, I just want to open by starting, this specific area is one of those, you know, being on the commission now for 10 years, I think this has always been these 6 blocks, basically, right around here, has always been one that's, what do we do as a city of plan going forward? What is the best fit to help accommodate, because it's the transition not only from commercial, how far that goes up the hill to what it is downtown, to the density as we go, you know, trying to keep the more dense housing closer to the downtown central area, you know, for the walkability and the use of that. But also where, and this block, the block above it, along with the park, has always been that kind of that line of where it feels like is that balance between where multifamily is going to change to ensure we stay single family. And so it's a difficult thing. And we have, you know, it's a difficult decision that we have, you know, as you know, my stance, you know, property rights are important and everybody should have that. However, equally as important is proper planning and following plans with what the public want for our city. And having gone through that process now, it seems like 10 years updating the general plan. You know, here last time we updated it, and we're doing it again. And you know, I like some of the comments that were made. I remember when those townhomes were built, and I remember thinking, how did those go in? You know, they just kind of popped in. I wasn't here in the commission at that point, so I don't know how it all did. It just kind of seemed like they popped in like a thief in the night. But especially then, you know, now you could see, well, that is more transition. Even just, I mean, was it 20 years ago when those were put in? And I mean, just the amount of change that we've had since then. You know, the school was over there by it, you know, back then. But and so, you know, as I look at it and say, you know, going through the effort and as much the arduous task of updating a general plan, trying to follow a general plan and say, hey, where do we have these transitions? What do we do to ensure property owners have the rights to develop and change and do what they want with their property, as well as maintaining the integrity of the other property owners that have that are on the other side of the opinion of what we do, and really looking at this in my opinion, is the residential city center zone has been created as that, almost that compromising zone of, hey, this is where many different things can happen. And so, like my comment before is saying, if we're changing the block to an R, or this to an R4, why not change the block? Because we already have the use there, not knowing that was kind of put in as a, I guess you would say, non-conforming use back then. And so I'm not one that says, well, let's change a zone to fix somebody else's mistake, to bring it into conformity, rather than just continue to live with it. And I feel like there's options. My opinion is really the city center zone with this is, I want the landowner to have opportunity to be able to do, it's hard to say, you say, do what you want with your property, if I want to build a helipad on my property, I can't, when it's my property. But, there's extremes in saying, so we can't just cater to everybody can do what they want with their property. That's why we have ordinances and zoning, and that is to bring some kind of community uniformity to our city so that everybody enjoys each other as neighbors and as a community, rather than a bunch of individuals with 8-foot tall fences and barbed wire at the top and say, stay off my property. And, and so I'm of the opinion that because of some of the opinions that were expressed tonight and where this specific property is, I don't feel like it is in the transition area. I don't feel like the city and everything has progressed enough to say, let's change the block in the area to an R4 and say, let's add more density. It seems like the surrounding neighborhood would like to, they're going to go kicking and screaming to that end. And maybe it's these folks as kids or their kids' or who knows when some of that other transition takes place. But I think in this specific instance, we're looking at an R4 zone that allows would allow up to 5 units. The current zoning, if the property owner wants to do something different, there is some options, and it may not be what the neighbors want to see either, but it is to the property owner. That's what gives us that flexibility of saying, hey, this parcel could be divided into 2 lots. It could be 2 single-family lots, or it could be 2 single-family units with accessory dwelling and get 4 units, depending on what they want to do with it. My professional opinion in the business is if it wasn't put into 2 lots and you just sold the lots, you'd probably make more money than building anything out, trying to make money from it. But because of the economy the way it is now, and let a different, but you can invest with your money and what you want, and maybe you want to live there. I don't know, and that's not, for my opinion, to push on you what you should do. But I feel like the current zoning that we have now, although it may not satisfy exactly what the property owner wants, it does give them flexibility to go more dense than what it currently is. And it also stays within what the neighbors have really kind of agreed to years ago when that was created. And so being that although there is a use that would be considered an R4 next to it, non-conforming, I think keep the uniformity of the RCC zone intact in that area until maybe at one point there's a much larger piece of ground, not one individual, but a group or however says, come in and said, hey, we want to change the whole area. We feel like we're ready for transition. So for what it's worth, my nickel and dime cents there.
I think that was really well said. Really well said. I think one thing I would add is, since I think everyone's, even the body language of the property owners, I think everyone kind of senses where this is heading, but potentially. But one thing I would encourage everyone in the city to look at, if it's a public record, which it is because Brandon Bell presented it publicly, is I think the city is looking at these transitional zones and trying to provide examples, information, and options as information for people who are concerned about more density coming in and people who have properties and would like to make them more dense. And I think the city is looking at, hey, these are solutions out there and these are things that have been done in the past. And so if people are interested, I think that, planning department here at North Ogden City is doing a great job at providing public record of examples to provide guidance and information about what options may or may not be available in different zones. And I think that's really good information and could be helpful. For people either deciding, I'm just gonna split the lot, I'm gonna sell it, or if it goes a different way tonight, I can put 5 or 6 units on it, or some other option, you know, just depending on. But I think there's more information out there that the city's providing to help people come to understanding and solutions, because the bottom line is the city's going to get more dense, whether we like it or not. It is, it's gonna happen. And how, I think we all need to wrestle with the question of what does that density look like in North Ogden? What, those of us who live here, how do we want that to look and feel? And that's a community effort where people are gonna have to come together to figure that out, because like we're finding out this year, water is a shared resource. It is. And neighbors, whether we like them or not, they're a shared resource. People you live next to affect your quality of life. So that's it.
Appreciate that. In discussion, I just want to make sure it's clear both to both property owners, you know, I am not one that thinks that, you know, if property goes and you have renters, that they're a lesser quality of life and will bring in, and they're not proposing renters. However, I want to make it clear is if they decide to say, hey, we're going to do this in 2 lots and do a single family house and an accessory dwelling unit, then you as neighbors, if they go that route, which they're allowed to, most likely you're going to have some renters, because that's what that does. And that is different than 4 or 5 individual property owners. And so those are some of the trade-offs. And so just to make sure all things are considered and what you get. But, you know, they're a property owner does not mean that it's a better person than a renter by far, you know, so.
Couldn't agree more. And I agree with how you started this discussion off completely. I am wrestling with the fact that, you know, just because we're trying to look at all sides, I do believe that what is being proposed on this property is an improvement to what it is now, right? And I do think the city is interested in improvements and not letting things be dilapidated, right? So I was interested in trying to find a way to progress something forward here tonight in the interest of making a property improvement, because I think that's important. However, as proposed, I can't support creating a little island with this zone. So my thought was we either have to zone the whole block, as was discussed earlier, or this should be denied. I just can't support making it a little island with this zone right there. I don't think there's interest in the larger rezone of the whole block. And so I think I'm opposed to this rezone. Although that's not an easy decision to come to.
Yeah, I think the residential city center zoning is the appropriate zone. And I think, you know, like you said, just this little building, although it looked beautiful, it seems like it doesn't fit in with the character of that block to me. To me, there's a sort of a historical character to it. It would impact a tremendous number of neighbors. And if that were built right in front of my single family home, I would be devastated. So I guess I'm very sympathetic to the neighbors, and I feel like the residential city center does provide some leeway, and you know, to develop the property in a different way that fits more in character with the surrounding homes.
It's hard because of that 10-plex, right? Like, does it transition from a
Well,
10-plex? Yeah,
you know,
yeah. So
yeah.
it really is difficult. I have emotional anchors into this property too. I used to ride my bike down there, and correct me, there's an artesian well just to the north of it, right? I stop there and get a drink, and I mean, I think anyone who has lived here for some time kind of has hooks into this area, right? But my overriding principle is to protect the city center, I think. And yeah, as stated, I think I would support an overall rezone, but I don't think that's going to happen tonight. So this specific application, I don't support. But I actually, at some point, we need to transition from a 10-plex to single family, right? So what is that transition? And it's probably going to be multifamily. We're probably not going to get one house on that half acre there. I just don't see that as being in the cards for that property, right? But 3 houses on a half acre.
I don't know. I disagree. I think if, like Eric mentioned, if you were ever just interested in selling it, People would love all the trees and the privacy and the half acre. They might just want to build a pretty home and I don't know.
Appreciate the character of the neighborhood.
Yeah.
I don't see that as realistic way to develop that property, having driven by it a few times and things like that. I just don't think that it's going to turn into a single family dwelling.
But I'm not sure that it's up to us to decide how to develop it.
Sure.
I think the question before us tonight is what is the appropriate zoning designation?
Sure.
Yeah, so if I'm summarizing the opinion of the commission tonight, it would be, recommendation to leave the RCC zone in place. Would be open to if the neighborhood as the scene, the block came in collectively and wanted to rezone, then it seems like we would support something like that because everybody was on board versus a single lot out of the block. But really, again, this, difficult decision for us, we pass on a recommendation. And the city council has the ultimate say on what that is. So one way or another, a recommendation or of positive or negative from us tonight can go either way with city council. And, I'd entertain a motion for.
You just made a motion.
I think we've discussed it.
I motion that we recommend to city council that the property in question remain zoned as is. At the current time.
I second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Commissioner Webb,
Yes.
Commissioner Arner,
Yes.
Commissioner Nancarrow.
Yes.
Commissioner Barker,
Yes.
Commissioner Mason,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So just this will continue to go to city council with its recommendation. If this is the desire that you still want R4, you don't have to continue, but you can. And if you want to, my recommendation would be really talk to some more of the neighbors and see if that is something that's supportive or not, because it sounds like, at least from our level, a group effort would be probably more entertaining than just an individual. But it's a hard thing, and sorry it didn't go the way we were hoping, but hopefully there's something that can come that works for you guys and for the city and the neighbors. Thank you.
And you guys do understand, as we stated, that we're a recommending body, right? The final decision.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, let's go on to item number 8, zone text amendment 2021-2, public hearing, consideration and
Mr. Thomas, I
recommendation.
recommend a quick break.
Okay.
Okay. Can I move for that?
Yeah.
Or you want to move on without me? Thank you.
Let's excuse Commissioner Mason and move on. We can talk about hedges. while he's absent for a second. Zone text amendment 2021-2. This is a public hearing for consideration and recommendation on a legislative amendment to add clarifying language regarding hedges as they are defined as a fence. The presenter will be Planning Director Scott Hess.
We don't always get the opportunity to answer the really important questions. But when you spend a week thinking about when is a hedge a fence, and when is a fence a fence, and when is a row of tightly spaced trees a hedge that constitutes a fence, this is what we get to bring to you tonight. So thank you. It's over. There's no good definition of a hedge. That's what I'm getting at. A North Ogden City resident applied to the city to install a row of tightly spaced evergreen bushes or trees, they would be trees, along a fence line to increase privacy for their property. The code 11-10-11 fence height regulations is loosely defined enough regarding hedges and their permitted height in rear or side yards that really one could interpret that the proposed landscaping is defined as a hedge and would end up taller than permitted by city code, and therefore would need to be cut down to the height of a fence, which eliminates the whole benefit of planting the hedgerow of trees for the privacy. So in this case, the hedge could be interpreted to be the fence, and we're just trying to add clarity to the code to answer that question of when is a hedge or a fence. So In staff's opinion, as we've gone back and forth around this, I've had multiple conversations, including those with my family and friends, John Call, city attorney, and staff. A hedge operates as a fence, in our opinion, only when there is either no other fence on the property line or when the property owner specifically installs hedge plantings to operate as the fence, per the definition in 11.2.1, which says a fence is a tangible barrier of any material or a line of obstacles interposed along a line between two portions of land above the surface of the ground on each side thereof, with the purpose, intent, or having the effect of preventing passage or view across the fence line. This definition includes hedges and walls when used for these purposes. So the proposed ordinance updates the code by adding language specifying that the height of a hedge is only limited to a fence height when the hedge is being used specifically in place of a fence or as the only barrier at the property line. So once you put a 6-foot vinyl fence on the side of your house, that's the fence, and everything you plant behind it is landscaping. If you eliminate the fence and that hedge is pulled out on property line or is intended to be, then the requirement would be that you can ask the property owner to cut that down to 6 feet tall or 7 feet between two interior lot lines. And we have this, we have this healthy discussion argument going back and forth about tall trees that block sunlight and tall trees that leave stuff on other people's property and block views and all sorts of things. And that gets into a whole fun land use law realm of spite fences, which kind of created the reason that we have height regulations for fences in the beginning. And my opinion is that you leave those to nuisance law to take care of. If there's something so egregious, so awful that the property owner has planted on their property line that is affecting you as a property owner, then you as the affected entity can sue that person. But this is a really difficult one to legislate out any and all potential impacts that you're thinking about when you're planting a hedgerow on your property and the code says hedges in front yards can be no taller than 3.5 feet. Hedges in required rear or side yards can be no taller than 6 feet. I mean, it creates thousands of non-conforming uses and or illegal situations across the whole property or the city that we're really not intending to do. So the language that staff has proposed to add to two specific sections, 11.10.11 A and B at the very end, is that hedge provisions in this code section apply only to hedges used in place of a fence or acting as a fence as defined in 11.2-1. And so it's kind of belt and suspenders. I think you can draw that conclusion if you read the fence requirements and then you read on the heels of that the definition of a fence. But this just creates a circular reference that says this is specific, these heights are limited only in these cases as defined this way. The conformance with the general plan, this really, I actually had to dig around the general plan to find some places where this would apply, but assuring that North Ogden remains a beautiful place to live, work, recreate, preserving the essential characteristics of a family-friendly community that assures an enduring legacy, small town feel, and a high quality of life in North Ogden. We believe that this code amendment is in conformance with the general plan. The intent of the fencing ordinance is to provide an opportunity for property owners to protect their personal property while limiting impacts on neighboring property owners. Fence height limitations retain essential sight lines in the front and rear yard and restrict unsafe development in the Clearview Triangle intersections. The ordinance as currently written would continue to protect that safety and personal property rights while adding clarity about when we're dealing with a hedge versus a fence. Summary of your considerations tonight is the request of positive change for not only a specific property, but does it make sense for the entire city? Is there additional language that would be appropriate for this ordinance? And is the proposal consistent with the general plan? And staff recommends you hold a public hearing, consider the proposed ordinance and make a recommendation to City Council.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Any questions for Scott? Pretty straightforward.
Yeah, what'd you say?
Yeah. Let's go ahead and open the public hearing for zone text amendment 2021-2. The public hearing is now open. If anybody would like to address this, please do so at this time.
Move to close the public hearing.
We got a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Before I vote, I'd like to know if anyone was commenting on Zoom.
No, nothing on there.
Okay. Aye.
All right, discussion. Any discussion on this? Pretty straightforward. I think it defines it well to where.
I think you did a good job. A lot of times this stuff can be resolved between neighbors. Without a lot of conflict or input from the
So if
city.
you don't want your trees tightly woven together,
Well, it's
looking like a hedge, put a fence up and then it can be trees.
Just take a chainsaw about midnight, it works great.
Yeah.
Public record, public record.
All right.
I
Do
just-
we have a recommendation for city council?
My neighbor wanted to put a fence in. He just come to me, "Joe, I want to put a fence in." He says, "Okay, you should go ahead." I go, "You want my hedges out?" He goes, "Will you let me do it?" I said, "Have fun." So he brought a backhoe in and hauled them all out, and I was happy.
There you go.
Make a motion that we forward a positive recommendation to the city council to approve the legislative amendment to add this clarifying language regarding hedges as they are defined as a fence.
Guess I'm the second man today.
A motion and a second for positive recommendation. Commissioner Mason.
Yes, I missed most of the presentation, but I did read through it this afternoon, so what I read, I agree with. So I would vote yes.
Commissioner Webb,
Yes.
Commissioner Harder,
Yes.
Commissioner Nancarrow,
Yes.
Commissioner Barker,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So that recommendation will move on to city council. All right, down to our discussion items. Long awaited back there on the back row. Item number 9, discussion on the general plan advisory committee for core growth opportunities. Are you presenting something to us? Or are you just here for discussion? Oh,
Part of it, but
okay.
I'm excited.
Scott, is that, okay, go ahead.
On the heels of that discussion about the race out, even this is going to be an interesting discussion with the planning commission. So in your packet, you have this hand-drawn general plan map. This was general plan advisory committee presented to staff, this future land use map. Staff took this back and really was considering ways, we know that there's more pressure on housing than houses available. It's driven prices up. We continue to have mostly infill from ourselves. This is, self-driven. We have a large number of people per household. We have a lot of children. So the question comes down to, are we providing adequate housing choice in North Ogden City? Are we giving, opportunities for people to really live, work, play here in all realms of life? Or is North Ogden a city that people have to exit, have their first home somewhere else, come up in the world, and then you can eventually purchase in North Ogden? So it's this question of, density, which can sometimes mean affordable housing, mostly, anymore it doesn't. And then also just how we're going to accommodate what our build out says is approximately a doubling of our population. So right now we're about 20,000 people. We think that's about 40,000. And so what we did is we looked at this map and decided on some areas that we thought were represented opportunities for either increased housing opportunities or to preserve essential characters of North Ogden City. So I'd like to give you just a brief 90-minute presentation, and then we'll have a discussion. It's a number of slides, but hopefully it's interesting, and then we'll have a discussion after. So John, do you have the the PDF of the PowerPoint?
That's the wrong one.
Maybe he needs to stand up and unplug and plug it. At any rate, there it is. I'll begin.
Yeah.
So this is the third committee to hear this. Staff prepared a presentation on a request from General Plan Advisory Committee to look at a few 4 specific topics. So the next slide, John. What we're going to call the trade mindset, and then some tools that we have as land use planners, so zoning overlays, cluster subdivisions, transfer of development rights. We developed these growth areas, and then moderate income housing. So we presented this to the General Plan Advisory Committee, received their feedback, and then just because of the timing of the meetings, we took it to City Council. I would have liked to get your feedback before that, but we just want to make sure that that staff and the general plan advisory committee aren't moving far, faster than the planning commission, city council on making some of these decisions. So first topic here, next slide. This is kind of interesting on the left
I wonder if
there.
it'd be helpful to kill the lights over there. Is that possible?
Yeah. In cleaning out my office, and I've been here just about 2.5 months, so everything is new to me that's in there, and I'm going through some rolled up maps. And on the left here is the 1961 comprehensive plan. And zoning maps haven't changed a whole lot. Yellow is essentially residential. In this case, brown is higher intensity residential and red is commercial. So and then all those other little figures that you see are schools that are dotted up and around based on the population that was expected at the time. The thing that is always interesting to me looking at map, this is 60 years old, is how many things they got right. And then the things that, the city decision makers at that time either didn't put in place the land use tools or that just, slowly changed over time. So a good example of that is really the lack of any sort of commercial opportunity north of our city center, north and east, beyond a fish farm or fruit stand or that sort of thing. And a question that staff would ask the planning commission is that appropriate? Should we be thinking about small commercial centers, small commercial opportunities outside of the Washington Boulevard 2600 North area to the east? But then the other thing is just how interesting this is from a transportation standpoint and hillside protection and where they thought the development was going to stop. Next slide. So we had a discussion internally with staff about this idea of a trade mindset, and the way to think about that is that in accepting additional density, it's not necessarily, and this is for the whole city, every individual property is different, but it's not about what you lose, it's what you save. So you have to think about if we allow development, but we get, we are able to preserve this really intrinsic thing, then was that a benefit? And in some cases, we try to save everything and we may end up getting nothing saved because everything just goes to the same uniform level of single family zoning. And then we don't think about, we often see the risk of allowing new development, but it's helpful to see the risks of not allowing greater housing choice or development. So one is state legislature has already taken away some control of our local ability to add or subtract density, also design standards on single family homes. So we may just lose a larger portion of local control to the state if we're not proactive. There's unknown development patterns may occur that are either haphazard, uncoordinated, or not in harmony with one another. You see that in cases where we start to, develop, we're going to do this 1 acre today and this 1.5 acres tomorrow and this 3 acres, when if you step back and you do a master plan of that area, you get a better development, but that means that you might have to say no to somebody today. We may overlook a responsibility to be inclusive to a wide range of people, but also many who are similar to us. And then we risk having even greater housing affordability challenges, especially given that many people, you and I are now facing a very different housing market than when many of us purchased our homes. And we'll talk a little bit about housing prices. So I asked a question on the left to the General Plan Advisory Committee, or that was my list, sorry, on the left, of what do you love about North Ogden that you want to save? And from staff's opinion, it was agricultural views and open spaces. We have urban agriculture here that kind of Barker Farms is an example to me of urban agriculture. It's surrounded entirely by single family homes, but it's still an active, viable farm. Fruit orchards, our annual event is literally called Cherry Days. Recreation access is just incredible for North Ogden City. And then hillside sensitive lands. We've got, an opportunity to save the best areas, not all areas. There's going to be development up on the hillside, but let's think collectively about how to do that creatively. And then when I think of North Ogden, I think about water resources, and especially in a year like today, or this year, you've got open canal trails, which are unique to this area. You've got Coldwater Creek. There's discussions about daylighting portions of that. And then the stump is iconic to North Ogden. This idea that there's places in the city, you poke a hole in the ground and literally springs just pop up. And then our historic commercial areas. So the General Plan Committee added to that. They want to save, access to mountains and nature, the hollows that they grew up playing in, green spaces, agriculture. They like to focus on that, local food to the table, and how to keep local families farming, and then remaining conscious of development's impacts and thinking about the historic aspects of the city. And I dropped a Y. So I'll stop and ask a question. I did this to the city council too, and they gave me a few comments, but what do you love that's not on this list, that's not captured about North Ogden that you really want to save and preserve?
Views of the mountain.
Mountain views.
I believe that's not just Commissioner Nick Carroll expressing that. I've heard that from neighbors, and I believe that's a real thing that's missing.
That's why we're all here.
I was born there. I had no choice. And I guess I could have moved.
But then you miss the mountain, so you come back.
Exactly right.
I'm not, it's probably captured under there in recreation access, but I think another thing that's really important to a lot of us, and we've had this discussion, is access to those mountain trails. As the development moves up the mountains, I guess you'd say, I think it's important that public access to some of those trails and recreation areas that have been open to the public for so many years is, that's not cut off by development.
I'd like to add a comment about Coldwater Creek. I fished in them as a kid. I thought those fish escaped from the fish farm until I saw a presentation about what it is, the northernmost tributary to the Weaver River. I grew up fly fishing. It is an incredible resource, and I cannot believe that it was covered up. And talk about something that could be done that would be so cool for this city. When I stick my hand in it, I'm like, yeah, that's why fish live in there. It's clean, it's clear, and it's cold. And it's a resource that I think we have no idea in this city what could be done with that, and it could be incredible.
That's a good point.
That's true. That's something I loved that we don't have anymore, was flowing water through Oklahoma Park and things like that. That was definitely cool. It's gone. So.
City water.
So I'm sure there are public input to this. This isn't really a public input portion of the meeting. So so acknowledge that we have opinions.
Yeah, call me, send me an email. I'd love to add it and think about this as we move this forward. But in the interest of time, next slide.
I actually want to add one more thing. I think walkability is a very positive issue to North Ogden City that is underappreciated. It's a very walkable city in a lot of parts of our city. I grew up riding my bike to Kings.
Yeah.
I, walked to Macy's when 7-Eleven came up. And the North Ogden pool, when it was by North Ogden Park, you talk to anybody of that age, everybody rode their bikes there. It is a very walkable city just based on how it's set up. So it's already built for some cool density things with an agricultural element, even where the library is. That's a real asset. So it's very unique.
When I thought about what I love about North Ogden, I thought, well, I like opening to people I know and things like that. So along those same lines, right? So then I thought, what does that matter to planning? Well, I think connectivity matters. So walkability, connectivity, right? Like that we don't have isolated neighborhoods, and that we can get around to downtown and things like that. So,
thank you. So I'll talk about three planning land use tools that are commonly employed. Some are easier to do than others, but one is zoning overlays. So an overlay is essentially a way to add additional requirements, restrictions, or sensitivities on top of an existing zoning district. And probably the easiest way to think about this is hillside and a hillside overlay. As opposed to having the HP 1, 2, and 3 zones, the city really could have had a residential zone apply, R1 point, whatever size the lot wanted to be, and then apply a hillside overlay to it for areas of steep slopes or other protections of sensitive land. So the drawing is shown as kind of a corridor overlay zone. This could be, you apply it to a section of, say, Washington Boulevard, where it's in transition, or you see an area of increased mixed use opportunity, and you keep, you retain C2 as a base zoning. Somebody can come in and do a standard commercial zone, but also has that opportunity to do an additional type of development or, requirement that they need to meet. The next one is cluster subdivisions. So these two drawings here have the same number of total doors on them. One would just preserve additional open space that would be preserved in perpetuity through some sort of land conservation easement or by a homeowners association. And the thing to think about, or one thing I think about in development all the time is that cities don't, we don't build our city, developers build our city, and then they turn those developments over to us. And every foot, mile, inch of pipe and asphalt and concrete is a check that we write in perpetuity to maintain that resource as soon as it's turned over to us. So thinking about cluster subdivisions from a financial standpoint, long-term financial viability, is oftentimes you can get the same number of total units on a given piece of property with fewer total infrastructure, requirements that are given over to the city. So it's in shorter pipes, just less to maintain over time. And if you have something that's really important in that area or intrinsic to value to that piece of land, then you can cluster around it and you preserve that central component.
Are you saying that it leaves some open space as well?
Yeah, so this is a way to, in my opinion, it's the you could be concerned about density, so you want to save your single family zoning, but then by saving single family zoning, you obliterate everything on the site. It's just scraped completely clean. You cover up creeks, you cover up any topography on the property in order to just plow down homogeneous single family homes on top of it. And at the other side of it, you might have ended up with 3 or 4 units of townhomes, but it clustered that down. The developer was able to get the same number of total dwelling units on any given piece of property, but done in a way that's sensitive to preserving open space.
So when you have that, you oftentimes have like an HOA that would mow the lawns, or sometimes is it left like in a natural state? So that
Yeah, you can do both. It depends on what it is. It would have to be owned by somebody, and restrictive covenants or a land conservation easement recorded against that piece of property would restrict it from being developed in the future.
In my opinion, zones like this work well on the hillside and stuff where you have natural vegetation anyway, right? So you see that over in the Ogden Valley a little bit. You'll go over there and you think, well, everybody has 1 acre lots over there. Well, they don't. There's lots of 1/4 acre and stuff like that, and they're clustered like that. But then there's just natural vegetation.
Yeah, it can be really beautiful.
And then the last tool is transfer of development rights. And it's really easy to conceive of. It's really difficult in practice. So this is the idea that your property rights is like a bundle of sticks. You've got, the right to build something on it and develop it. And you've got maybe mineral rights and water rights and all sorts of things. So you can extract that development right. And you have an underlying zoning of R110. You got, 10 acres and you can put in that number of homes on that particular piece of property. So, 100 homes on that piece of property. And if you only want to do 50 of them, but a neighboring property owner down the street wants to do 150, you could sell those development rights. And that's where the rub happens, is that it's really easy to conceive of selling your development right. It's really difficult to locate those areas in your city that are going to be the receiving zones for that density. So, that development right goes up, reduced development on one piece of property to preserve it in perpetuity. That property owner gets financially compensated for their land and then maybe is able to continue farming it forever, but then somewhere has to accept that increase in density. So cluster zoning is like a transfer of development rights, but all on one box of somebody's property. Like you're just basically moving any, the total number of dwelling units you can build on one property around. But this is just much more difficult. You have to make the political and the legislative decision of where are those areas that currently might allow, between 8 and 10 dwelling units an acre, and now they're going to be 20.
So does the city set overall, and this is how many people can be in the city? And then you leave it up to capitalism for that to fall?
To some degree, and that's really how our development patterns happen right now. In the state, there's county control totals on expectations for population, and then those are sort of divvied back through the cities, through long-range planning, and Wasatch Front Regional Council, our metropolitan planning organization, assists with that. So we have an idea of what our build out would be, but build out happens multiple times over the life cycle of a city. And I worked for Clearfield City. Build out for Clearfield happened at some point in the 80s. They developed all the easy land, and then it sort of like springs back like a rubber band, and you start to see infill and reinvestment and vertical development. We're seeing that now in Sandy City, was completely developed out. Now you have a whole core, the Cairns district, where its densities that would have been completely unheard of in the late 90s are, happening there, 30, 40, 50 acre, there's really intense areas. And that's not to say that's
for us.
That's the, yeah,
Like, I've heard that this is a working model for things like pollution and stuff, right? Like, hey, this is how much particles we'll put in the air, and you guys sell to each other and see who's gonna do what, right? I've never thought about it.
Actually, the city was using, use this at one time between Barker Park and Marriott. And development upon the bench. We'll make it, if you'll help develop the park, we'll allow you to do this.
Right.
And so that way the city wouldn't have to pay to develop the park.
And there's a lot of considerations about this of who is the density bank. The city can operate as the density bank and maintain those. You can have third party, but they're difficult. These are difficult programs to do, and it would make more sense on like a sub-regional level to do something like this, like partner with 3 cities and think really holistically about master planning and where it's going to go. I'm not recommending transfer of development rights. It was just brought up as, let's look at this as a tool. So we can move on, and we'll talk about the four core opportunities that staff highlighted. So one we're calling the hillside clustering, one the city center, another the agricultural protection opportunity, and then the community gateway. And it might seem silly, but I like the idea of applying a name to something that you're trying to do. It helps people conceive of what that is and wrap their head around it, and then also kind of grow support for this is going to be the agricultural protection area. We're going to really focus on it. So the first one is hillside clustering. So the next slide, John. The hillside below Benlow and Peak it's iconic to North Ogden City. There's a clear line of grass and dense scrub oak that's visible across the valley when looking from south to north. It's privately owned. It does have a development right within Weber County at approximately 1 acre lots, but the developer's been discussing the possibility of annexing into North Ogden. So staff proposes that one strategy for that area would not be to just blanket it with single family homes, but rather to provide some flexibility for the developer to move those same number of units that they would be allowed under whatever zone it gets annexed into around on there to just protect sensitive areas, to protect maybe the scrub oak, to develop better access to trails and open spaces up there. And that's certainly a possible use of clustering up on the hillside.
Can I ask you a question about that? So obviously that's been looked at a lot. Does it seem like in that particular area that it would create a development, kind of like the clustering example, that would be a win for the developer because they would have to move less dirt, and a win for the city because we would have some open space and some clustering? I mean, am I interpreting that right, or am I missing something?
No, that's my opinion, but I think one thing that you'd have to be prepared for is that you're probably not going to see a clustering of, you would see some single family homes, but this could come with a multi-family type of product on the hill. And
you're gonna get people living closer together.
Yeah.
Right, you're gonna get smaller fourplexes and stuff and more of them. And people have historically, in my opinion, in this town been opposed to, right? Okay, so so you're gonna get people living together with open space around, right? So it puts people more on top of each other. But when you're looking at it from 5 miles away or whatever, you'd see scrub, big buildings, in my opinion, right? So it makes a feel of open space, but the actual people living there, they're living in a multifamily environment usually.
For the people moving in, not necessarily the people who live in houses near them, or am I misunderstanding?
Well, yeah, I think that would primarily work as new development, right?
Yeah.
Like, it'd be hard to go in and just.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and so that's a good example of density is not affordable housing, or multifamily is not affordable housing. I would imagine that would be some of the most expensive dollar per square foot housing probably in the valley, like this side of the mountain,
Right.
essentially to think of a 2, 3, 4 story condo building that has that beautiful view up there.
Lakeview Heights is a cluster separation, by the way.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so about that, but it is.
It's not necessarily that it's single family homes or townhomes. It simply is, hey, there's 3 units to the acre. We're gonna make quarter-acre lots instead of third-acre lots and make parks and things.
Yeah, it's a really good example. You see people starting to remodel those houses in Lakeview Heights because they have that open space in the back. It's kind of a win-win, but they're people that I know who bought those homes are like, I just don't want to mow so much grass, but I like that there's grass out there.
Have you ever seen developments on the golf course?
Yes.
They do this, right? All the time. You got like high-end condos, right?
Yeah.
And then they're on top of each other, 46 units at a time. It's real nice usually. I mean, that's what we probably up there. And then there's the golf course, right? The open space. So.
Yeah, I mean, and then it also helps some of those other things we talked about, preserving the view, the access, it gives a lot more flexibility with that. So I love it.
Next slide, I found this picture, it popped up in an image search, but that's a 1962 image of Ben Lomond from the golf course, Ben Lomond Golf Course, and kind of interesting tie that picture was taken at the same time that general plan was done, and there's almost no development, above, I don't know, 300 or so, or 3,000 north, and very little development, so kind of interesting. The next is the city center opportunity, and this was, an animated slide, but what it shows is that this opportunity, it's about maximizing the accessibility of our existing commercial core and government services, the library, city hall, senior center. It's the one area in our city plan for future transportation improvements, including through transit, and that includes increased transit, bike, walk access through streetscape designs on Washington Boulevard. And it's currently developed with a mix of uses and housing types. So you have to the top, top there is apartment buildings and fourplexes. The bottom across west of Washington is an apartment building. And then you have an R15, 5,000 square foot lot, kind of smaller home, smaller lot, residential. And it's all focused within this, what I'd say is probably like a 10 or 15-minute walk shed to the majority of the services that are available for the city. So next slide. And this not only makes sense for an area of increased housing choice, which is a way to say density, but I don't like the word density because it comes with all of the baggage that comes with it. It really is about providing opportunities for housing choice. Your first house, your second home, third, that might be a single family home on the hill, and then where do you go when you're tired of mowing that half acre? Is there an opportunity for you to find a high-end, multifamily type of living situation that you can live your whole life cycle in North Ogden? But what you're looking at here, that highlighted square, this is from Wasatch Front Regional Council, our metropolitan planning organization, and they use a measurement that's called access to opportunities. And it's a measure of how many jobs are accessible via transit or car, both today and the future. This is an accessibility by transit map. And this is kind of in the weeds from a planning perspective, that housing costs are really a function of two things. It's your house price, your mortgage and your rent, plus your transportation costs. So household costs should be thought of as this H plus T and should be factored in when making decisions about housing choice and location of future growth. So this area has a really high rate relative, and you can't see the numbers, but it's 300% higher than the region as a whole. And that's what you're seeing on this snapshot, is this sub-region of Weber County. But you have a 300% higher rate of jobs accessible by transit in that area right there, that little square. So what that would say to a transportation planner or city planner is that when you have high accessibility to jobs via transit, you want to put rooftops in that area, because the rooftops that can walk to that transit line can then get to 300% more jobs than those areas outside of that particular area. And that's, it's a data-driven way to think about where are areas of your city where you should be focusing on this, because that might provide somebody an opportunity to get a better paying job, purchase a little bit more expensive home because they can offset it by being a single car household and reduce that transportation cost for themselves. And then the last piece here, or actually, no, this is 3. So the agricultural protection area, this is looking back against Barker Farms. I think preservation of these areas can be done really, really well through clustering or transfer development rights or conservation easements. But the city has to be proactive to save these areas, because the property rights of owners who may desire to develop these critical resources, they have an underlying development right, whether that's RE20, and you could see this go completely away in half-acre lots, and that's perfectly permittable. You know, people don't build illegal subdivisions, they build what the zoning code permits. So thinking about agricultural protection through clustering, again, you kind of have to change your mindset, because it might be RE20, so you're thinking half-acre lots, but what you really need to think about is how many doors on that particular piece of property are permitted, and then give flexibility for how those land. So the next slide, I think that this is a good visual representation of this. This comes from Layton City's general plan. They've got an agricultural heritage overlay zone, and they developed this specifically to save West Gentile Day Farms. There was an existing farm out there, and they took a quarter to half acre zoning district, and they permitted down to about 4,500 square foot lots. So it looked different than people would have thought about what the west side of Layton would develop as, but it preserves this very large swath, large usable swath of agricultural open space that in that case is continuing to be farmed by the family. And so this could be homeowners association, it could be leased ground, but at any rate, it's a way to get the same development right fulfilled for that property owner, but in a creative way that preserves one of those intrinsic values for the city. And then
This slide made me think of something we didn't include on the previous slide that I think lots of people love. It's Fruitland Drive.
Yeah.
Fruitland Drive is a total asset. And yeah, I think everyone loves driving down it. Owe a huge debt of gratitude to the Barker family that continue to farm it. It's a heck of a lot of work to do that. But everyone is like, oh, we love the open space. We gotta make it easier for them. Don't make it harder for them, or they won't want to farm anymore. And we all love it.
And then I'm getting near the end. The last one here is the community gateway is what I would call it. And this is the area of the city that is generally understood to be essentially the receiving zone for the density. And you've got Village of Prominence Point down there. You've got multiple projects. So this is south of Kurtz, west side of Washington Boulevard, maybe some east side of Washington Boulevard, and then north up to about 2200. And the southern portion is currently being developed. I think that this is another area that connects to vital services, to transit, to jobs in the greater Ogden area, and represents an opportunity for us to continue to think about where to intensify and provide really a wide range of housing options. And the last slide here, this comes from a general plan from Mill Creek City, but really thoughtful consideration of entryway areas to your city can create vibrant districts that provide commercial areas as well as housing options for current and future residents. So this is a corner that would be 3300 South and one of the main roads in Mill Creek, but thinking about a community plaza as a required element of a commercial district, and that commercial district is mixed use, so it has ground floor retail and residences above, at probably a higher rate of housing to commercial than you would think about. Usually that's required to make it pencil, but I think that core area down there, and Brandon had a great idea that Kurtz and the cannery, Kurtz is such an iconic structure that, you know, using that as like an architectural theme and focusing on that little historic, you know, like corner, that gem that we have, and then allowing some residential or multifamily and kind of mixed use around that would be a really neat entryway to the city. So that is the end of the 4 opportunities that I have. And I'm going to just give you a few brief slides on moderate income housing, because I think it helps, at least to me, drive home some of the issues that we're facing today. So one of those state required elements that continues to get kind of more intensive is a moderate income housing plan. The city's had that requirement for 15 years, but now the state legislature is requiring us to update it annually and do a report back to the Department of Workforce Services. And moderate income housing is thought of as housing that's at or below 80%, 50%, and 30% of median family income. So North Ogden residents, we do very well. So the average for Weber County is 31,248. That's a single household earner. I didn't do a family of 4, but like you can cut these numbers a bunch of different ways, but this was the easy way to do it. So single earner in a household, North Ogden's average, their median is 33,371. So I thought, because I've been searching for a home, and I was looking on Utah real estate every day, what's available in North Ogden right now, and how much money will that get you? So As of, this is 6/23, I looked again today, there were 15 active listings and the number breakdowns are actually about the same, except for there's a few more in the first category because some townhomes have come up for sale now. But you've got $355,000 was the least expensive thing in the city, and it was a small townhome west of Washington, south of about 2,200. And then there was one really beautiful $1.1 million house that I clicked in and then clicked out of. You know, I work for the city. It's gorgeous. So what does that buy you? What does that require? So my underlying assumptions in the next slide are you have a 20% down payment and that the mortgage on the right doesn't include your taxes or any HOA assessments or any other assessments that you might have. So if you've got a home price of 355 to 389, your base income based on conservative lending rates, which it's hard to get a loan right now. It's not easy money today. You got to make $52,000 to $58,000 to afford that at a 20% down, and your mortgage is going to be $1,200 to $1,350. So I thought, who of North Ogden employees, and I tapped our HR director to help me. Our administrative assistants start between 28 and 35. Our public works stormwater folks are making between 30 and 41 to start. At 5 years of experience or with their certifications, if they really push through them, they can hit $50,000. And for police, you have to be kind of that same number of years of service. You're just touching on that higher end of the starting pay salary, $57,886, which is what would give you as a single earner, single earning household or single household earner, the opportunity to buy the least expensive real estate in North Ogden today. So, many of us couldn't likely afford the home that we're in. You couldn't rebuy your home. I was in that position before we sold our house, and we've now closed on a home. We feel really fortunate, but it was a struggle to find a house, coming back to this area. So, so thinking about what that means from an affordability standpoint, you've got, and this slide's fine, John, but John Hansen is currently building some townhomes that are going to start at about 380. And small single family homes on a 4,500 square foot lot with a 2-car garage in West Haven are about 475. And that's kind of the entry point for real estate. And North Ogden, it just goes up exponentially from that point. So what we're recommending to the General Plan Advisory Committee, the state requires us to choose 3, what they're calling menu items from the Modern Income Housing Plan. We'd like to add because I think that we're doing this already, we can capitalize on some of the work that the city's done, is rezone for densities necessary to assure the production of modern income housing. We're going to allow accessory dwelling units. Again, that's a state requirement now, so we're doing that. G, encourage higher density near transit investment corridors. That's the city center. We don't have an actual defined transit investment corridor. That's light rail and or commuter rail as defined by the state code. We're going to remove K, which was preserve subsidized units, because North Ogden, after a review, does not have any subsidized housing units. Add N, or recommend adding N, participate in a community land trust program for low or moderate income housing, and we can talk more about that in the future, but it's the idea that a land trust owns the land and then sells you the box, the structure of the house. And the way that preserves affordability is it's essentially a long-term land lease, and you're limited in your appreciation of that home. So you can gain appreciation as a homeowner, but when you sell it, it might be capped at a few % per year. And then that land trust, continues to have first right of refusal or own that land. And then the structure is sold again to another qualifying family. So it retains in perpetuity some affordable housing. Again, it's would be a whole new program to develop and or partner on. Implement a mortgage assistance program for employees, but then we had a little bit more discussion about that on maybe waiving impact fees for employees, or can we look at how to make this broader, but the city doesn't have general fund money to provide mortgage assistance, and I tried real hard to see if they would do my down payment or something, but they wouldn't. And then P through U or blanket apply for or partner with outside agencies. Utah is a really great partnership state, and retain that. I mean, we would partner with anybody and everybody to provide better moderate income housing opportunities for the city. So that's the end of the presentation for the general plan advisory committee recommendations, and welcome any questions you have. And we have a representative from Stephanie from the general plan committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd be interested in hearing from this case, some of your input on that and what you like. And I know you weren't prepared to say anything, but
No, that's fine.
She's always prepared to say something.
just come up to the mic. so we
I
can
am
get it.
not, I actually am. Well, I don't
Oh,
like to.
should I say not prepared, just ready?
Yeah, if I'm
So
gonna
you're,
speak,
can
I'd
you
like
state
to
your
be
involvement in
prepared.
that and then
Stephanie Casey, I am a co-chair of this committee. And actually, Scott came in and brought in some great ideas. We've been talking about clustering. We didn't quite understand it. We've been trying to look at that. We've actually been trying to fill out overlays and what that looked like, based on some of the concerns we had in the city. Agricultural areas between Ben Lomond and Pleasant View, you know, that was, you could see the zoning happening and kind of the trickle down zoning, and how do we control that? How do we really make sense of keeping those agricultural areas, having it, part of it being so close to the city center, you know, that area that is next to the old Public Works that keeps coming, you know, we keep seeing some plans for it, but it's got a lot of townhomes. And that seems to be kind of what is the go-to for all developers right now. And we find that a little bit frustrating. And, you know, I think the housing options, the housing choices is such a great path and way to look at things, that housing options and how they actually fit in the area and how, you know, the impact they have on surrounding homes is huge. And I'm starting to look at development and planning a lot different in how I look at it and see it. You know, I see the field behind our house or behind Barker's, and that massive single family home looking right down into Melanie Barker's house. And, you know, I'm like, just because that was zoned in something that made everybody comfortable, that development is not at all. You know, that's actually really damaging to surrounding property. And that, I think, is our biggest problem, and something that we need to be looking at when we're planning and zoning is actually how does the housing fit. And
the solution to that, would you recommend smaller lots or, I mean, what?
no, I think one of the things that he showed is the overlays, the ways to look at things. When someone is looking at an RE20, if it falls in an overlay and there's an agricultural overlay that gives options on how to, you know, possibly do the smaller lots, but leave open land. You know, I look at that now behind my house and I'm like, I would take that any day. I would take a higher density with a different housing option that had more open land than what I would normally think I would want back there, you know? And so I'm realizing that it's just really looking at what's surrounding it, how it's gonna work together, the impact on surrounding lands, how it's gonna be used.
What about this? So I think we both came to the same conclusion on that. 5 years ago, I would have thought low or more density bad, right? And it just means more crowded, but you know, interesting how we get the word out to the public that we feel this way, right?
And, you know, when I listened to Scott present, one of the things is not necessarily density, it's housing options.
Yeah.
And that really is like, when I talk to people now, I can do it with a little bit of excitement because I feel like I actually can work it through my head, and I'm like, no, we're looking at options to solve moderate income housing, to give different housing options throughout the city that aren't townhomes, that aren't high density, you know, I mean, they may be higher density than we're used to, but you know, it's more about housing options and how those fit into the area and how those work with the surrounding homes. And
Steph, have you seen the presentation that Brandon Bell did about housing options?
oh yeah, I carry that
How do you-
everywhere. I
how do you
actually
feel about
follow
that?
Johnny Hansen out to show him the cottage
Oh.
court. I'm sold on the cottage
What
court.
did
I
Johnny
think
think?
he actually got excited, and it was mostly because I had seen him present those townhomes packed in there tight twice now and turned down, and I just kind of went out and I said, hey, have you looked at something else? You know, why is it always townhomes that look the same, packed as many as we can? There's other housing options, there's other ways. You know, I love the duplexes that look like a single family home. I also think something like that into a neighborhood that's all single family home as an option, you know, it provides different housing options in an area that it's not going to impact. You're not even going to realize that there's a duplex there, but it offers a family, you know, it gives you options, and it doesn't, I also don't like this area is where we're going to put it all. You know, kind of the other side of the tracks feel. I don't like that. And I think that there's a benefit to incorporating housing options where we can. But I think most of the community is really up in arms because density is what we hear, and we compare it to Village at Prominence Point. That's all we have, and Patriot Point. And being really aware of how it impacts surrounding homes and surrounding properties, and realizing that their property values and their property rights are just as strong as the developers, and somewhere we can find, you know.
So it sounds like there's two problems, if I'm hearing you right. One is we need to provide developers with options, and if we provide them, they'll probably build that. But the second problem is educating the public as to what this means, and it sounds like that's the harder of the two.
Yeah, I think we're kind of in a rock and a hard spot, but you know, and developers, I don't know necessarily that we give them options to do.
Sure.
But do you know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Most profitable. I mean,
And they're going to, but also we have zoning, and if they want to, you know, I think that there's something to be said if we say, look, we'll work with you, it's zoned for this, what you're bringing, we just can't do that. Because, you know, I think it's our job to represent existing homeowners. Developers have plenty of representation, you know, and so we need to be having more communication. You know, I think sometimes it's just like, no, sorry, that doesn't fit. And they leave frustrated, not really knowing what to do. And we may have some ideas that we say, look, we think something like this would fit in this area. What, are you willing to look at something like that? You know, I think that communication is sometimes cut off, but as far as the presentation and where we're going and what Scott has shown us, I think is really exciting. I love the agricultural overlay, the city center overlay possibility, and some of the conservation overlays. And I just, you know, I'm still learning about it.
What about hillside protection? Have you looked into that?
I think that falls under the conservation.
So you
I think
support
we're
that?
just, the hillside protection, yeah, I mean, if I really could just say, I would say we don't develop the hills, but you know, that's just my idea, you know. I'm also reading the study done in 1995 after the mudslide on the water, and actually the impact of building in that area. There was a huge study done by
The mudslide from 91?
it was, yeah, but the study was done in 95, and it was done by Utah State. And I've got it, and I'm trying to study it and understand it, because there is also that is an impact, and that impacts our city, and you know, that impacts our water. So we have to understand what that's going to be and make sure that we're doing it right. You don't just do it because, and have consequences down the road that everyone is. Anyway.
How do we educate the public?
I don't know. That I thought about that because I was going to comment when they were talking about that.
What if someone had a Facebook page?
There's so many Facebook pages. I'm like out for that right now.
I'm not on Facebook.
What you do is you announce everything's gonna be zoned to multifamily.
I think it's the way we.
And everybody here, and they say, hey, now this is really what.
Just kidding.
I think it's the way we talk. I mean, when that was all happening, when Johnson, when you were talking about, you know, the impact, and there's different options and how these guys, you know, they were kind of listening. It wasn't such a harsh, oh, those townhomes right there. You know, I just think it's the way we communicate. I think removing density as much as possible, because that's already that's a swear word, you know, and I see why. You see Village at Prominence Point, and that's I talked to a lot of residents and there are some big problems there. And I don't know how that's gonna be fixed. And so, I think it's just gonna be a matter of time and how things are talked about and how we move forward. But, I think that discussion was a great discussion.
Is there anything you think we need to do to fix problems at the Village of Providence Point?
That's,
It's a whole other topic, but it sounds like you have opinions on that.
I do, but I don't know that that's necessarily that the city has any control of it at this point.
Got it.
Some of the things that are happening over there.
Okay.
So I think it's just, when we're
You don't like
developing.
people parking on the sidewalk?
Well, that's not even it. They have some, there's some homeowners issues. There's some big issues, but once, we just have to be really careful when we're doing things like that and, turning it over because there's a lot of people over there that are struggling with some issues and we can't help them because it's out of our hands now. So we just need to avoid that in the future and learn from it, I guess, I don't know, but.
And as far as educating the public, I think that we've had, the General Plan Advisory Committee was so, perfectly situated to do that first moderate income housing plan. And then with COVID, I think there was a big question mark of how you actually engage with the public in a conversation this large. So as we've talked, I think that, if we get some level of like thumb in the wind, yes, this seems like a direction the city could go from the advisory committee and the city council and the planning commission, then we'd like to go back and think about what the public involvement process looks like. So more than an online engagement, whether that means it's a charrette and you're bringing people in, or if it's, open houses that we host or putting, boards up and out at the entranceway to Lee's and Smith's and have conversations with the public. We can talk about what the best way is, but I think we're at a point in the conversation that this really needs a public, public buy-off and consideration and we're there. Yeah, public.
I can say that sitting in the city council meeting, there was a pretty big crowd. I had people around me. When you gave your presentation, they were very tuned in and just like, oh, like they were also seeing options that they had never seen, and some of the maps with the clustering and that was like, wait, what? Who is this guy? Like, this is, and they were so excited because they could all of a sudden see things different. We really are used to seeing the townhomes come up and where are they gonna go? And they all have a tendency to look the same. That doesn't mean they're bad looking. I'm not saying any of that, but it's the same. And so, yeah.
You can't expect someone to read a zone and put an image in their mind.
Yeah.
They just get scared, and when people can't see it, it's a fear-mongering mentality. We gotta get them pictures.
Yeah, well, and I love the housing presentation. You look at it and it's just, there's actually a cottage cluster that was, I want to say, built probably in the 30s up in Ogden that is so cool. And I just love that, it's like these little single family homes, one driveway in, you would never even know. But there's like 6 of them and they're smaller, they have a little court with, and I'm not saying, but there's really cool options of housing choices. So, but when you say higher density, it's like, no. But if it's like, well, we've got some different housing options that might fit in here, and you see something.
Housing options now are single family house with a big lot and a white picket fence, or a skyscraper tower apartments. That's what people think.
Yeah, or, well, here it's
Density
a
is.
single family home or townhomes.
Yeah.
That's what everybody thinks is what we've got. Those are your options.
Hundreds of other options, hundreds.
And using housing choices, people tend to not put that immediate wall in, and you can talk and show, and it may not be the right thing, but it just, there's housing. And anyway, I'm really excited about where we're, the discussion, just the one meeting we've even had, Scott, I'm like, holy cow. So.
Good.
I'm excited about it.
Well, I'd like to thank you for your service on there. Sincerely,
thanks.
I
Yeah.
really appreciate that.
I mean, I really like it. It's nice when you finally feel like there's some solutions to problems and you can see a way forward that makes sense and that isn't gonna say no development or it's gonna end up like this, you know, that's. So I'm excited.
It's good.
Anyway.
Thank you.
thanks.
Scott, can I say one thing?
It's up to them. Sure. You got 30 seconds.
So Scott, what you asked the planning commission, and I don't know all of you that well, I know some of you, Eric is definitely a developer. North Ogden is blessed with some phenomenal developers and some not so good ones. But I would suggest get the minds of the developer. I've done lots of clusters. I've done lots of overlay subdivisions, not in North Ogden, but in multiple other cities. I could tell you pluses and minuses of physically doing it, paying for it, the problems with it, the benefits, the multifamily, the historic. Oh, it's multifamily. That's horrible. It's going to be game ridden and well, you know what? At the cost to build at $230 a foot, it's going to be really nice because I don't have a choice but to make it really nice. And with an HOA in place or a homeowners, whatever to manage it, it's not the traditional garbage of what it used to be. But again, there's multiple options, and to get the public's opinion, but also some developers who have done that. And I know that he's kind of kidding, but actually to get the public in, tell them there is some massive density going in or something zoned where you'll get those people that I've been in this meeting. I think it was most of you guys were there where I got beat to death by, there were 70 people in here and they had prepared. You get one of those guys that leads those groups and they'll bring in ridiculous amounts of people if they even hear the word density or that's just, I know this isn't a public forum, but that would be a suggestion where you get some developers.
Developers who live in the city, I mean, when it's your home, everybody looks at it differently. That's a great resource, those minds and that experience of people who live there.
Any other discussion on this side? Was it?
No, but it was really beneficial to have the water discussion at the end of the city council meeting because the room was full and I was right in the middle of the agenda with that same presentation. We should do that every time. I mean, like a pawn shop on the corner, just send out some letters. And then make them wait till the very end and be like, no, we're gonna table that item.
Okay, remarks from planning commissioners?
I bought a punch pass to the green waste facility
Nice.
and had them retro punch it, just for full disclosure. I've been using that facility. I thought it was a benefit. So,
Scott, do you have anything
There's
for
a
us?
fee.
No, I don't, thank you.
Brandon, Kai?
My
Okay,
comment would be Brandon Mason is one of the funniest people I've ever known in my entire life. For the public record.
John?
No, nothing other than just a reminder about the barbecue on the 24th of August. Keep that on your radar. I'll keep bringing
At
it
the
up
pool.
because we want people to come.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. Motion to adjourn.
Move adjourned.
All in favor?
Second.
All right, thanks.